Hi, my name is Carol Goldsmith. I'm the president of Fresno City College, and on behalf of the Fresno City College staff and students, which, by the way, if you haven't heard, California's first community college, along with my sister colleges in Clovis and Reedley, and the other centers in this great State Center Community College District, which serves well over 55,000 students pursuing their educational goals. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome each and every one of you here today. As evident by today's agenda, this informational hearing is designed to focus on ensuring the master plan meets the needs of students. A special thank you to Assemblyman Berman, Joaquin Arambula, and others and their states, other states and their staff for making sure this event goes off without a hitch. I'd also like to thank a few of the notable dignitaries that are in the audience. First and foremost is my boss, Dr. Paul Parnell, Chancellor of the great State Center Community College District. Trustee Deborah Ikeda. My fellow sister and comrade in arms, Dr. Lori Bennett of Clovis Community College. I know that we also had Dr. Jones from Fresno Pacific University joining us. Thank you, sir, for being here. We also have Ben Duran from the Central Valley Higher Ed Consortium joining us. And if I've missed anyone else, my sincere apologies. Again, I know who I want to thank. I want to thank all of the students, my local students and students who've traveled great distances to be with us today. I'm looking forward to hearing your voices on how we can ensure the California Master Plan may better meet the needs of all students. And as a historian, I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment to talk just for a second about how important this day is to our future by highlighting our past. The post-World War II era has had significant impact on the reorganization of American higher education. Of the approximately 17 states during the late 1950s and 60s that modified their public and private systems to promote coordination, control cost, and ensure a system that is built to educate the public, none did the massive work that California did. That work then resulted in a system that was the envy of the world. During the 1950s, California struggled to find a common vision for higher education system. And at the opening of the negotiation process, books have been read about that tense time. And it was understood by all that the stakes were extremely high for the University of California, for the state's colleges, and more importantly, for the people and future of California. I would argue that today, the stakes are even more high. Clark Kerr, the president then of UC, was a key figure in the development of the California Master Plan. The plan set up a coherent system for post-secondary education which defined the specific roles for the already existing University of California, the then California State College system of senior colleges, which we now know as the California State University System and the California Community College System. The plan referred keenly to Kerr's vision and the role and the importance of higher education in the mid-20th century America. His insights in California's changing needs and aspirations was pivotal to the development. Its development and adaptation required both pragmatism and political skill. These three guys I know are listening to that last word, political skill. Its implementation propelled California higher education to national and international prominence. However, as demographics and the years wore on, the economic and educational circumstances and realities have changed over the year. Young man in the front, can you hold up that device for a second? Hold it up high. That wasn't around in the 1960s. And to think about it, much has changed in the 1960s. So again, I want to welcome all of you to Fresno City College. It is my hope that through these series of informational sessions, we can embody the spirit that those held during those courageous conversations of the past and to be bold in our planning of our future. It is my hope that the work that takes place today and future sessions will continue to hasten the planting of the seeds of hope for our future, our mutual trust, and in order for us to be able to move forward and create a new shared vision of how California will educate its people. I believe that everyone here on the panel and everyone in the audience and those who are watching online are committed to making sure that all of our systems work together to provide the best for our students today and for the students of our future, with the skills that they need to thrive in the 21st century economy, that we're living up to the promises that we made in the 1960s, that accessibility, affordability, and high quality will still remain. So ladies and gentlemen, again, thank you and welcome to Fresno City College.
Thank you so much, Dr. Goldsmith, and thank you to your team here at Fresno City College for your hospitality and for working with my team to make today's committee hearing a success, and I know it will be. And also thank you to everyone that's joining us today. This is the third hearing of the Assembly Select Committee on the Master Plan for Higher Education in California. And this hearing is being recorded and will be available for viewing online on the Select Committee webpage by as early as tomorrow. In 1960, California developed a visionary plan for the future of higher education, known as the Master Plan. However, much has changed since 1960. Population growth, increased student diversity, a change in leading industries and their need for talent, as well as in the field of education itself. Representing Silicon Valley, I see how quickly technology is advancing along with the rise of new industries. Both have altered student needs and boosted demand for higher education. We need our higher education system to respond to a host of issues never previously envisioned, including the iPhone, or any smartphones, I should say. My goal for this select committee is to hold hearings throughout the state to conduct a thorough legislative review to ensure that California has a master plan and a higher education system for today and for tomorrow. We need to keep the state's promise to our students of providing an accessible, affordable, high-quality higher education for all California students who qualify. The Select Committee is the first step in a multi-year endeavor to update the master plan. Now, I'm coming in with an open mind, and I do not have any preconceived notions or solutions, and I encourage my colleagues to do the same. I view the first 2 years of the Select Committee as being the information gathering phase, where we hear from all stakeholders and collect as much feedback as we can. The Select Committee held its first hearing last year on August 31st in Sacramento, where we heard an overview and status of higher education from the Legislative Analyst's Office, as well as from the leaders of California's higher education institutions, specifically the community colleges, the CSU system, the UC system, and the Association of Nonprofit Private Institutions. The second hearing, which was held on November 1st at San Jose State University, focused on California's workforce needs. At this hearing, we heard from academics as well as the business community about the workforce skills gap that we're facing in California. In addition to today's hearing, we plan to hold 2 more hearings this year, one in Southern California with a focus on the needs of faculty and staff, and then one back in Sacramento to examine cost and funding issues, including financial aid. After the conclusion of the hearings, the Select Committee will issue a report, likely at the end of this year, summarizing the hearings as well as recommending the next steps, such as what issues need to be focused on in more depth. Today's hearing, focusing on the needs of students, will be student-driven, with a student kicking off each panel. Our hearing will consist of the following 3 panels. The first panel will discuss affordability and examine the total cost of attendance for students. In this panel, we will hear from a UC student as well as from the Institute for College Access and Success. The second panel will discuss the basic needs of students such as food, mental health, and housing. And in this panel, we'll hear from a CSU student as well as from representatives from the public higher education segment. The third panel will discuss equity and student success, where we'll hear from a community college student, a Fresno Pacific University student, the Campaign for College Opportunity, and the Central Valley Higher Education Consortium. And there will also be an opportunity at the end for public comment at the end of the hearing, and we have a sign-up sheet for folks who would like to speak, and I think the sign-up sheet is just out the front door, and really want to encourage everybody who has something to say to participate in public comment. The Select Committee has a membership that's appointed on a bipartisan basis, and we are very fortunate to have members who have a strong background and interest in higher education with us today. First and foremost is our host and your Assembly member, Dr. Joaquin Arambula. And with that, I'd love to welcome my colleagues, starting with Dr. Arambula, to say any words they have.
So I just wanted to say it's so nice when I'm back home and in my backyard. For those of you that don't know, I grew up about a block away from here. I live less than half a mile away from here right now, and it really is nice being at the first city college in our state and second in our nation. I'm particularly proud that my colleagues wanted to come and hear our voices in our community. So often we feel that Sacramento doesn't hear us, but here we are to hear from you. Finally, I'd like to say that not one of us who are here on the panel were around in the 1960s. And that as times change, so must visions. And what our master plan must do is meet our needs of today. And so look forward to hearing from the students on how we can better make improvements. And thank you again for being here at Fresno City College.
Thank you, Dr. Arambula. And we're also joined by Senator Ben Allen, who's the chair of the Senate Education Committee. Senator Allen.
Well, just a word to thank the organizers, everybody who helped to put this together. Obviously, my good friend Mark and Joaquin, we had a nice chance to drive down the 99 together from Sacramento this morning, and it was just really fantastic getting to know your Assemblymember Arambula a little bit better, and just to hear the pride that he takes in Fresno and this community and all that's happened here was really special. He took us out to lunch and got a chance to get a little flavor of the Tower District, and so I really appreciate that. I served as the student board member of the UC Board of Regents when I was a law student a little while back, and got a chance to spend some significant time in the Valley with the growth, witnessing firsthand the growth of UC Merced just up the road. We're certainly proud of the successes that have taken place there, but we're also proud of and also concerned about the broader challenges and needs that our entire public higher education system faces here in California. And I'm just glad that Assemblymember Berman has really taken on this issue in a very substantive way, updating and examining our master plan that was written in 1960, and it's served the state so well over so many years, and yet there's no question in everybody's mind that it deserves a little bit of an upgrade. And that's what we're doing with this subcommittee. Typically, we have this strange inter-house rivalry that I never quite understand in Sacramento, but I wanted to make sure that as chair of the committee that oversees education policy on the Senate side, that I be an active participant in this effort, and that's why I'm here today, and I'm excited to hear about all the stories that will be brought forward to our committee today. We're going to be focusing a lot on affordability questions, an enormous problem statewide. Young people are being asked to step up and leverage their futures to levels that I think previous generations never could have imagined. And then exacerbating the costs that we're putting onto just the basic cost of an education, we then have all the enormous housing costs that have just gone through the roof everywhere in the state. And it's really becoming an enormous challenge. The wild thing is that now it ends up that the total cost of education tends to be higher for a low-income community college student who doesn't live at home versus a UC or Cal State, just because at least at the UC they've got decent wraparound services for room and board for low-income students. That of course doesn't exist in any kind of robust way at our community college level. So we're all facing enormous challenges right now as we try to think about how to move forward. But I really do applaud Mark and Joaquin for their leadership, and I'm looking forward to hearing the testimony today.
Thank you very much, Senator, and thank you for your involvement. It's going to make, as we move from the information gathering stage to the legislative stage, the joint and close relationship that we have, I think, is going to make that a lot smoother in both of our houses. So really appreciate you taking your whole day pretty much out to come and spend it with us.
There's a direct flight to LA that I'm going to catch later, so get to get home.
And so our first panel is, do we have a list of? Perfect. And so we think the local elected leaders have been introduced. If anybody wasn't introduced earlier, please let us know, and we'll be happy to recognize you during the hearing. And so we'll move on to our first panel, which is on affordability, the total cost of attendance for students. And so I'd like to introduce Spencer Brandt, who's a student leader at UC Santa Barbara. Thank you, Spencer. And Debbie Cochran, Vice President of the Institute for College Access and Success. Thank you so much, Debbie, for joining us. And so we'll kick it off with a presentation from Spencer.
Good afternoon. My name is Spencer Brandt, and I am a third-year student at UC Santa Barbara. I have the privilege of being here representing the UC Student Association, a system-wide advocacy group with a strong history of campus activism and education policy advocacy for the 200,000-plus undergraduate, graduate, and professional UC students. It feels good to be here in Fresno because it feels like home to me, too. I grew up here in the Central Valley, as did my parents and their parents before them. I'm cognizant that here in the Central Valley, we lag significantly behind the rest of the state in terms of higher educational attainment. Only 13% of adults in my home county have acquired a bachelor's degree. My family is reflective of that number. Throughout my childhood and teenage years, I can remember my mother always telling me that she couldn't wait until I went away to college. Whether that was because she saw potential in me or because she saw an angsty teenager who she wanted to get out of the house, I can't be completely sure. But more particularly, my mother always stressed to me that the cost of college shouldn't prevent me from pursuing a higher degree. The degree, the skills you learn are worth it, she would tell me. Occasionally, this message came across as the typical motherly encouragement, and other times I could hear in her voice that she was trying to tell me something else. Something about her own journey through life that she regretted, something about the inaccessibility of college when she was growing up, and the financial struggles that had limited her options. Despite those odds, she had acquired a degree, so I took her advice and applied to the schools of my dreams, all in the University of California and CSU system. I was admitted to UC Santa Barbara and quickly decided to attend what was and is still the most beautiful campus in the world. Upon enrolling at UCSB, I quickly learned that the cost of college for students are not confined to the classroom. The cost of college includes books, course readers, and lab coats, housing, often in saturated markets with perpetually rising rents, and food and other basic needs needed to survive. Another thing I learned from my mom, a K-12 teacher for more than a decade, is that academic success does not begin and end in the classroom. It extends to every student's home environment. I've had to make tough decisions about whether to buy every book that I need for a course or to go to the market and buy ingredients for dinner. I've sat in lecture wondering what it is that I can do to come up with those extra few dollars to pay rent. I've maxed out on the amount of student loans I can have. I can tell you the names of every financial assistance program that we have on campus, which ones are grants, which ones are loans, which ones require proof of an eviction notice before they step in with meager assistance. Because I've been searching for every possible avenue to pay for these costs. I can also tell you that I know that financial support that students receive is going to get smaller before it gets bigger. This is because our segments of higher education and the state are only two pieces in the web of assistance that is provided to students. At the federal level, student aid grant programs have been decimated. In 1980, the Pell Grant covered 77% of the cost of college attendance. Today, it covers less than 1/3 of that cost. Pell is no longer tied to inflation, and uncertainty and neglect at the federal level threatens to impose further financial hardship on students. In addition, increased enrollments have impacted the housing markets for campuses across the state. My first year, I lived in a triple room on campus, in a dorm that was constructed around the time that my grandfather was born. Older friends of mine who had lived in the same dorm were shocked. That room was a closet with 2 people living in it. How do you manage? They would say. Needless to say, we were eager to move out after the first year of close company. This year, the last freshman doubles were converted to triples on our campus to accommodate rising enrollment. My roommates and I decided to move out of the residence halls and into Isla Vista, a college town directly adjacent to UC Santa Barbara, where the costs were ostensibly lower. We began searching for housing for the coming academic year during December of our first year at school. We quickly realized that the only way to find something halfway affordable was to find some friends who were willing to pack into an apartment like sardines. We settled on a group of 6, and then 6 turned to 8, and 8 to 10. Our leasing company paid us no deference and leased out the unit that we had been eyeing to another group of students. So we added the final 2 people to make it 10 and signed a lease on the bottom story of a duplex for a grand total of $6,850 per month, well above the cost estimates posted on the UC website. My parents agreed to split the security deposit. My share was $1,400 in total. We'll get it all back, I assured them, but my friends and I knew that Isla Vista landlords are notorious for getting away with highway robbery, pocketing thousands in falsely claimed damages every year. Today, as far as our landlord knows, we have 8 people living in our little blue house. But in reality, anywhere from 10 to 13 people are crammed into 2 bedrooms and 1 garage on any given night. Some who are additional subleasers, some who are friends that are experiencing homelessness. The student aid I received this year through Cal Grant A and direct federal loans comes $150 short of covering the cost of my rent each quarter. Needless to say, when I'm not studying, I work to make up the difference. While the home environment can be cramped, loud, and overwhelming sometimes, at least I can say that I live with some good friends. Not all students can say that. This kind of environment can take a toll on our students' academic performance and mental health. Cal Grant and loans don't cover the cost of basic needs either. As a freshman with a meal plan, I paid almost $2,000 a quarter for nutritious and consistent meals paid for by a special grant given to first-year students. Now that I live off campus, I can't afford to be paying $10 per meal, so I cook for myself as often as I can and buy food and other basic necessities at the market down the street. The prices there, unfortunately, are well above the state average. Cal Grant does not cover my cost of living or my cost of education during the summer months as well, even though my lease lasts year-round. Because of the difficulty I have getting into courses, I need to begin and continue my major. I have pursued taking classes over the summer. I can't do this at UC Santa Barbara because Cal Grant does not extend into the summer. This leaves me in a time crunch to take out as many courses as I can to finish my degree in 4 years before my financial aid runs out. I had no idea about any of this before I stepped foot on campus and experienced the trial by fire that students know all too well. We need a more accurate and transparent assessment of these costs so that students can make the right financial decisions. Lastly, these leaves books, course readers, and other educational supplies as a third consistently under-prioritized cost that I and other students bear, the price of which are rising faster than housing or tuition and fees. These are the true costs of attendance. They go far beyond tuition and fees. Students are engaged in a constant balancing act, weighing their academic attainment against some of their basic needs. In past hearings held by this committee, we have heard about the importance of making the university accessible to all California students, especially those that are from underrepresented communities, including people of color, undocumented students, students from rural communities, and students with disabilities. If our state wants to claim the mantle of standing for these communities and for a vision of opportunity and social justice, this is imperative. And if our state wants to meet the needs of California's vibrant economy, we must increase the number of students with degrees and close the degree gap. But we do this by investment, first and foremost. The California public higher education system clearly lacks the resources to accomplish the major task of enrolling more and more students without a major shift in tone on the part of our lawmakers and executive branch in regard to funding. If you're hesitant to believe me, take a look at the state of our campuses right now. Come visit our classrooms and sit with students in the aisles of lecture halls. Visit our research labs and talk to our researchers who work with aging and dilapidated equipment. Call our Counseling and Psychological Services Center and try to schedule an appointment. I can promise you'll wait anywhere between a day and a week to see a therapist, and once you do, follow-up visits are scheduled weeks away, if at all. Now imagine that these institutions have enrolled thousands and thousands of more students without adequate reinvestment, and try to tell me that they are still the #1 public higher education system in the world. We must collectively reimagine the role of higher education in our state. I believe every resident must have the right to attend college without debt, without tuition, and without an unbearable cost of living. Students on our campus have high hopes in our collective ability to produce that long-term vision for public higher education in our state. Through it all, we must look at the student experience as our guiding light. We must raise per-student funding in all segments of higher education, lower the cost of attendance for students, and we must work together as students, workers, as faculty, as colleges, and as policymakers to make this vision a reality. I can promise you that students are ready to do their part. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Spencer. Spencer and some of his peers came to my office about a month and a half ago to talk with me about their experiences at UCSB and how they really want to be a constructive part of this conversation, and your participation today is a huge step in that direction. Really appreciate that, Spencer. Thank you very much. And next up, we have Debbie Cochran, Vice President of the Institute for College Access and Success.
Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm so happy to be here with you. The Institute for College Access and Success is a nonprofit, nonpartisan research and policy organization based in Oakland, California. I'm the organization's vice president, and I also lead its California policy and advocacy work. I will acknowledge right now that I'm going to go through some of these slides pretty quickly. I actually pulled the PowerPoint together before writing up what I was going to say about it and realized I might have been a little too ambitious. So bear with me. I really appreciate this committee's focus on making sure that the master plan is meeting the needs of students and starting off with affordability in particular, because we at TICA see affordability as very critical to both students' access and success in college. If you can't pay the tuition bill for college, then you can't access college. You can't step foot in the door. But textbooks, transportation, food, housing, those are all also costs of attendance for college. So if you only have resources to cover the tuition bill and not those other costs, you can't afford to keep coming back to the classroom day after day and week after week. You can't afford to visit the library or visit the tutoring center or go to professors' office hours. So those are the types of costs and those are the types of financial aid that students need to succeed in college. As a state, when we look at the research and how California compares to the rest of the country, we see that California has done a relatively good job with making access to college affordable. In California, young adults are much more likely to enroll in college than their peers nationally. Our community colleges have the lowest tuition in the country, and at all of California's public colleges and universities, about half of students attend tuition free. And that's really because we as a state have long set up our financial aid policies to make sure that tuition costs aren't a barrier to enrolling. But the state does not do as good of a job with supporting students with non-tuition costs. The California Student Aid Commission estimates that for 2017-18, a full-time student living independently off campus, that's the way that most college students in California at all three segments lives, they have over $19,000 in costs beyond tuition. So you can see the breakdown on this slide of how those costs shake out. Over $9,000 in the college's own estimates for housing costs. And as we just heard, those estimates might not even be realistic. Now, my next two slides are focused on three public colleges in the Sacramento area, and they demonstrate how much of a difference it makes to look at total college costs as opposed to just tuition. So if we look at just tuition costs, we can see that the community college is by far the least expensive option of the three choices that a Sacramento area student might be faced with. In fact, the cost of community college looks quite low. But when we add in non-tuition costs, the differences shrink, and the entire total cost of attendance for students at all three segments looks much harder for students to reach. Now, these are colleges' own estimates of students' costs, and we took them from colleges' net price calculators. Now, the net price of college is what it costs students to actually attend college. It's the full cost of college after taking out all the grant aid that's available to students. So it's what they really need to pay after grant aid. Now, net price calculators are consumer tools that are designed to help prospective students and their families understand what it's really going to cost for a student to attend a particular college. So we looked at the net price calculators for 27 public colleges across the state. All 9 of the undergraduate serving UCs and nearby Cal States and community college campuses, because we wanted to see what it costs for low-income students to attend each of these schools. Now, we focused on low-income students, by which I mean with family incomes under $30,000 of income a year, because analyses of college affordability across income groups consistently shows that this is the group that is facing the most burdensome college costs. It's also important to note, however, that the majority of African American, Latino, and Native American students have family incomes under $30,000. So looking at net price calculators, we can see, I don't know how well you can see that on the screen, but you can see that our sample student that we looked at net price calculators for would receive more than enough grant aid to cover their tuition at each of these colleges. But they're still left with net prices that would require them to borrow loans or work long hours to afford. As Senator Allen put it so well in his introductory remarks, in most regions of the state, including here in the Central Valley, this community college is actually the most expensive option for students. Now, in 2016, we surveyed 12,000 California community college students about the trade-offs that they face in paying for college, and they overwhelmingly discussed the challenges posed by their non-tuition costs. Many students shared stories about their struggles with homelessness or near homelessness, and pointed out specifically how little financial aid is available to help students with those costs. Students shared stories about having to choose between buying textbooks and eating. Many students pointed to the cost of textbooks as being unrealistically high, such as $200, with one student even asking very directly, how is a low-income student supposed to afford this? Now, as part of this same study, we asked students what they're likely to do if they cannot afford required textbooks. 1/3 of them said that they would do what they could to pass their courses without the books. 27% said they were likely to drop the course. So this exemplifies how students, when faced with unaffordable college costs, make choices that influence whether they'll graduate, in what amount of time, and at what cost. They can borrow student loans, which hopefully they'll be able to pay off once they graduate. They can work. The research shows that working more than 15 or 20 hours a week while they're a full-time student is detrimental to their success. Or they can cut back on enrollment, which puts them at greater risk of not completing. So I want to touch very briefly on each of those issues. In a joint effort with the Cal State Student Association, we recently found that the vast majority of CSU graduates with student loan debt came from families with incomes of no greater than $54,000 of income. Nearly 2/3 came from families with incomes less than $27,000. Public data from the University of California show very similar trends. About half of all bachelor's degree graduates with debt from the UC had family incomes less than $55,000. And the lowest income students were 3 times as likely to leave with debt as the highest income students. So this is a critically important trend for us to understand as we look towards state policy solutions to ensure that a college education is affordable. Students also work to cover college costs. At all 27 of the colleges that you just saw on that map of California, the lowest income students would have to work more than 20 hours a week to cover those costs. At some colleges, in all 3 of the segments, they would have to work more than 30 hours a week. So this is already once you've taken into account the grant aid that's available. So needing to spend this much time working means less time studying. And more than any other single topic that came up in our survey of students, students shared how these trade-offs for their time were holding them back academically. Moving forward, to ensure that the master plan's promise of educational opportunity is realized, we need more and better investments in need-based financial aid. We need to better recognize and address the total costs of college that students are facing. And we must ensure that financial aid investments are targeted at the students for whom college costs are the most burdensome and for whom barriers to enrollment and completion are most pronounced. Now, currently, the Cal Grant program does provide some support for students for non-tuition costs. But hundreds of thousands of eligible students every year are turned away from the program because there aren't enough grants available. Now, recent high school graduates who apply for a Cal Grant and meet the deadline, they're entitled to a grant. But if you're not a recent high school graduate, you have to compete. And in the most recent year, CSAC reports that over 400,000 students competed for less than 26,000 grants. And most of the students who are turned away without a grant have income so low that the federal government estimates they cannot afford to put a single dollar towards their college educations. Now, for the applicants who do receive a grant, the portion of the Cal Grant that covers non-tuition costs has not kept pace. It's lost most of its purchasing power. Now, had the award kept pace with inflation, it today would be worth over $6,500. Instead, the maximum award is $1,672. Now, in recent years, the legislature has created 2 new financial aid programs to increase this award for full-time community college students in particular. Now, this is very important progress in the right direction. It is also very important to understand that only 4% of California community college students receive the Cal Grant upon which these add-on grants are based. So it's important gains for a very small group of students. So I'd like to close by sharing findings from one more report that's relevant to today's conversation. We recently interviewed 22 experts throughout the state about their own perceptions of the strengths and challenges related to college affordability throughout California. And among these experts, there was a resounding consensus that California has a college affordability problem, and all interviewees agreed that improving college affordability means focusing on covering non-tuition costs for students. Many also expressed the importance of doing more for the neediest students, including non-traditional students, underserved students, community college students, former foster youth, and other first-generation students. Experts also universally agreed that affordability challenges negatively impact students in several ways. While student debt burdens rose to the top, meaning unaffordable college means more student debt, almost equally concerning to the experts were the impacts of affordability challenges on students' enrollment in college, their ability to get to college or through college in a timely way, and of course that it contributed to equity gaps that we see in college access and completion. So within our current state financial aid structure, the simplest way to make targeted investments to address these challenges is to increase the number of Cal Grants available and increase the size of the grants that's available to students for non-tuition costs. But the experts with whom we spoke also underscored the need for broader systemic reform. We need to also reduce the complexity of the financial aid system. We need to correct outdated assumptions about who today's students really are. Now, the Legislative Analyst's Office put out a proposal for financial aid reform last year. The California Student Aid Commission is considering reform options as we speak. So these are enormously important conversations, and we need to get it right. Implementing reforms will require both political leadership and additional investment, but the extent of the consensus around the problem and its implications underscore the costs of inaction. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Debbie. And I first had the chance to meet Debbie at a higher education conference in Southern California. And what you had on slide 3 here really stuck with me. And I've been repeating it and probably bungling it when I repeat it to folks for the last couple of months, which is aid for tuition facilitates access, but aid for non-tuition costs facilitates college success. And what good is it if we're setting students up to fail, essentially? We're letting them in, but we're not giving them the support they need and the financial assistance that they need so that they can really focus on their studies and be able to succeed. And so I really loved the way that that was phrased and really appreciate that. I want to open it up to my colleagues. First, Dr. Arambula, for any comments that you have.
So I just wanted to recognize 2 of the State Center Community College District trustees who are here, Miguel Arias, who's in back, as well as John Leal. And just wanted to thank you guys for being here.
Thank you very much. Senator Allen, do you have any questions?
If I could just parse apart the Cal Grant numbers that you just raised, Ms. Cochran. You were talking about how only 4% of all students get the Cal Grant B. Could you sort of flesh that out a little bit? I mean, presumably could you just flesh out that comment a little bit? Because you raised a bunch of things in my mind.
Sure. So, this is on, yes. So about 4% of California Community College headcount gets a state Cal Grant award.
Right. But it's surely a much higher percentage that gets some form of financial aid.
Yes, about 45% of students get the fee waiver. When we look at full-time students exclusively, almost 70 or 80% of students get the fee waiver, and more get a federal Pell Grant. But the Cal Grant program is not closely aligned with the community college student population. Students who are going to community colleges are often they have a gap between high school enrollments and college, or if they do go directly from high school to college, they've often missed the window. Maybe they weren't not on the college preparation track where they got in their FAFSA by March 2nd.
Right. So as part of your idea that we ought to expand the rules of eligibility for the Cal Grant B? Yeah.
I think we need to ensure that more of the 400,000 applicants who are applying, who are not these recent high school graduates, have an opportunity. There's been different legislative proposals for how to do that in recent years. One is just simply to increase the number of grants that's available. Another option would be to expand that entitlement window for all all high school graduates, or just a portion of them. I think that there's a few different ways to go, but the important thing is that we go one of those ways.
And what do you find, what ends up being the closest equivalent to the Cal Grant B for those students who are coming into the community college system a little later? What are their major sources of financial aid typically, if you're not eligible for the Cal Grant B?
Almost all, the three major sources of financial aid, I think the three largest sources of financial aid for California community college students are the federal Pell Grant, the fee waiver, now known as the Promise Grant, and federal student loans. Very few community college students actually borrow federal student loans, but there is more aid that goes to students through the federal student loan program than through the Cal Grant program.
And the fee waiver is the BOG
Yes.
waiver? Okay. Great, okay, thank you.
Thank you, and I think that's such a good point, kind of speaking to this whole effort, which back in 1960, the vast majority of our students were students coming straight out of high school. And today, in 2018, we have so many more students that are, worked for a couple of years and are then trying to attain a degree, or, started a family and are coming back now that their family situation is more stable, whatever it is, where the rules that we'd set up don't apply to them anymore. And so trying to find more creative ways to make sure that we're providing financial aid and support to today's students as opposed to the students of 60 years ago is going to be a really important conversation that we have. So one quick question that I have, maybe for Spencer or either of you, is, Spencer, from what you've experienced and what you've seen, could you maybe talk about some specific limitations of student aid in covering some of the students' non-tuition costs that you've kind of run into, if any?
Yeah, sure. Well, the first thing, of course, is that when you have the pool of student aid that you are granted from these various sources, the first thing it goes to cover is your tuition and fees at the university, of course. Then, as a student, my user experience on this is that I get sent a check or a direct deposit, and it's for whatever the difference is. So in between that, and I sort of mentioned this, my having maxed out on the amount of direct federal loans that I can withdraw and the amount that I was awarded in Cal Grant, that still comes up short of even covering the 3 months rent per quarter that I would have to pay. So obviously that's your biggest limitation. It's that it's not meeting the needs of students who are finding themselves in housing markets like this that have sort of perpetually rising rents. But of course, on top of that, that leaves no money for your basic needs costs. That's food, that's basic toiletries, it's your books, your equipment that you have to buy for your lab, it's your course readers. And I think I really want to put a pin in what you said about the fact that something around between combine those two segments of students that would either drop the class or try to get by in the class without going and buying the book. That's a real decision that students make. It's certainly a decision that I've made. I usually err on the side of just hoping I can skate by and that everything will work out. But it does hinder my success, of course. So these things are all interconnected.
Sure.
Makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Spencer. And Debbie, you've got, I'm not sure which slide this is, but the slide of the state that shows what college costs are for low-income students across California. And in the research that you've done, where's my question here that I wanted to ask? Do non-tuition costs of college, have you seen, do they vary across region? I mean, are some things higher in one region and less in another? And I mean, should we be taking some flexibility into account when we're designing new programs, do you think?
It's a very interesting question. I think actually gets back in some ways to some of Spencer's points around cost estimates. What we see when we do this research is often that it doesn't vary as much as you think. The California Student Aid Commission has for many years now put out annual estimates of what the non-tuition costs of college are. So each college has to pull together a student budget, an estimate of what it's going to cost a student. They can add their tuition to that, and then there you have your budget. But it's a statewide estimate. Most community colleges in the state of California use that statewide estimate. So that means Fresno City College probably shows the same housing estimates as San Francisco, City College. It's hard to imagine the housing costs are the same in those two regions, but at the same time, pulling together, their own estimates can be time-consuming and administratively complicated. So I think the Student Aid Commission's efforts that they're working on right now to get a better handle on what students' costs actually are and how they might be varying across the state of California are incredibly important.
Perfect, thank you. And I have a couple dozen other questions I'd like to ask, but I'm going to save them for the next two panels. So really want to thank Spencer and Debbie for your comments today. Thank you very much. And so our next panel is going to be basic needs of students, food, mental health, and housing. And before I introduce the panelists, late last year, I was reading applications. We have an Assembly Fellows program in the State Assembly where people who are coming straight out of college can apply for a one-year fellowship in the state legislature. And I was reading through these resumes and these applications of incredibly impressive students, and I was shocked by how many students mentioned that they started a food pantry on campus. And the fact that we have a need for that many food pantries on our public higher education campuses in California, including I hear one here at Fresno City College. And so our next panel is going to be on basic needs of students, food, mental health, and housing. And I want to first introduce Maggie White, who's a student at CSU Stanislaus. Hi, Maggie. Tim Galarno, who's the University of California Basic Needs Co-Chair at UC Santa Cruz. Hey, Tim. Dr. Denise Bevely, Director of Student Wellness and Basic Needs Initiative at California State University Office of the Chancellor. And Colleen Ganley Hammerman, Program Specialist at the California Community College Chancellor's Office. Thank you all so much for participating today. And we'll kick it off with Maggie.
Well, hi, everybody. Good afternoon. I feel so privileged to be here with you today. My name is Maggie White. I'm a graduate student at Stanislaus State, and I'm the president of the Cal State Student Association, representing nearly 500,000 CSU students from Humboldt, San Diego. And I've got to say, the fantastic speaker from UC who was just up here is also born and raised in the Valley, just a couple hours up 99 in Modesto. And, I've been so privileged in my position as president. I've gotten to travel all over the state meeting wonderful people, but Valley people are always my favorite, so I'm very happy to be here. And I feel very safe that I can say that here with a lot of Valley people around me. So first, before I jump into my comments, I'd just like to thank everyone here for the diverse work that you're doing to support public higher education in California and all of your different capacities, whether it's in the legislature or on the university campus. Truly, the work that you do has an effect on our students in all systems, so I'm so glad to be working alongside you. So I'm here today to address you all on the topic of basic needs in higher education. Before I get into what I'm seeing as a student leader in the Cal State system, I want to acknowledge that these issues are not unique to any one system. The needs of students to identify affordable housing and to remain housed throughout college, to feed ourselves on a day-to-day basis, and to at least attempt to take care of our mental health during the rigors of our education are unfortunately not unique just to the students I represent in the CSU system. In my position, I have the great privilege of working alongside student leaders from all corners of the state, and the stories I hear on a regular basis connected to basic needs are truly heartbreaking. I'd like to briefly touch on the topic of privilege. There is a great privilege in being able to attend college. And in my case, even work towards a master's degree, something that I never imagined until I was a senior in college and talking to an advisor. That had never been something that was painted as if it could be part of my life. We know of the many benefits of that privilege: opportunities for upward social mobility, access to jobs and industry in this great state. That privilege of just being able to pull yourself out of a life of poverty through your own hard work and determination. This privilege is a great thing, but I think that this narrative has in some ways hidden the severe struggles of our students. As state leaders, you all must often hear of the struggles that your constituents face on a regular basis. People who are chronically homeless, people who are sick and disabled, struggling to pay their extremely expensive hospital bills. Single parents struggling to work and take care of their young children. School teachers working in challenging classrooms, not being paid or supported enough. These challenges are overwhelming to the individuals and to the state. And sometimes I'm sure it may seem that the struggles of a college student are not as grave as those other concerns. However, while there is great privilege in attaining a college degree, the path to get there can be as challenging as any. And if a student lacks access to their basic needs, food, housing, mental health resources, they have a larger likelihood of struggling in college, dropping out before completion, and leaving the institution with debt but no degree. With that being said, I'd like to break these issues up and address them one at a time. With respect to food insecurity, we've heard for years about the struggle that students sometimes face to feed themselves. A few years ago, this issue became such a priority that we began to see both associated students' organizations on campuses and even campus leadership, like that of Fresno State, begin to address these issues by opening food pantries on campus. Since then, many different tactics have begun to be utilized on our campuses in the CSU, and you'll get to hear about many of them, I'm sure, from Dr. Denise Bevely, the Director of Student Wellness and the Basic Needs Initiative, as well as other representatives from the systems. Just a few weeks ago, the CSU released their system-wide basic needs report, and the findings were very grim. It was reported that nearly 200,000 CSU students face some form of food insecurity. Those numbers are staggering. I think the assumption is that the college experience should be a struggle. Everyone struggles in college, so why should this generation be any different? Are we just too soft? We just can't handle it? But I'd like to think that the struggle we reference ought to be connected to the academic rigors of a program. Right. That mental and emotional development that occurs when you're sitting in a classroom surrounded by diverse thought and opinion on a subject. Not whether or not someone's able to access sufficiently nutritious food to get themselves through the day. The impacts of the issue of food insecurity should be obvious, but it also should not go without saying. Students who have trouble feeding themselves report having more trouble in class. This part is critical because system-wide and statewide there continues to be a push to get students to that finish line of graduation even more quickly. And while great work is being done to achieve this goal of higher graduation rates, if we're not addressing our students' basic needs, that work will not truly be maximized, nor will it be equitable. The issue of food insecurity is obviously widespread, but it cuts differently among different student groups. While system-wide, 41.6% of CSU students report some form of food insecurity, 41.6% across the system. 65.9% of Black first-generation college students reported food insecurity. I'll say it again, almost 70% of Black first-generation students in the CSU face food insecurity. Among our students who are classified as underserved, their rates of food insecurity remain higher than the average. This means that as we continue to address this issue, the work must be done intentionally and with this state's dedication to equity at the forefront. In regard to homelessness, unfortunately, CSU students have not remained unscathed from this statewide affordable housing crisis. Before getting into what we know about the CSU's homeless students, I want to tell a brief story. Last week, very close to here at Fresno State, CSSA, along with Assembly members Caballero and Arambula, unveiled AB 2784, a bill to pilot a program to address student homelessness. For the press event, we worked with Fresno State student leaders to identify students who had experienced homelessness to speak in support at the press conference. Their student leaders tried for weeks to find someone willing to speak about their experiences at a public event, and they came close multiple times with multiple students who identified as homeless. But no student out of the many identified were willing to come forward and tell their story. The stigma of homelessness remains strong, and is no different for our students. And unfortunately, far too many of our CSU students do experience homelessness. 10.9% of students system-wide, that's 52,000 students in the CSU, reported being homeless sometime within the last year. And again, our African American first-generation students reported higher than average numbers at 18%. I probably don't have to tell you that when you're homeless, turning in that paper on time, attending class or office hours, and participating in high-impact practices and programs is probably the very last thing on your mind. The issue of homelessness in general, and student homelessness specifically, remains such a challenging issue to face because there are so few low-cost solutions. While with food insecurity, we've seen a number of advancements, from partnerships with county food banks, to donations from community members, to bringing students to Calfresh benefits. Those types of low-cost options don't really exist when it comes to providing a safe and stable home environment. Campus housing is not really a solution for most students, because on many campuses, the prices mirror the local cost of housing, or may even be higher. And in most cases, there are not many vacancies in campus housing to serve those students who become homeless throughout the semester. With few campus-based solutions available, our homeless students join the countless number of other people who are homeless in this state, praying for additional solutions and resources to solve this issue. I do want to mention that we have seen many campuses step up to try to help students who are struggling with homelessness. Many campuses have created small amounts of emergency short-term housing to help shelter our neediest students. But for many reasons, this is merely a Band-Aid. A good Band-Aid, but a Band-Aid nonetheless. While we know that many college-aged youth who are homeless seek shelter for safety, and these emergency short-term housing solutions offer our students at least that temporary safety, they are not proven methods to keep individuals permanently housed. This takes us to our last issue of the portion, mental health. All of these issues seem to relate to one another. After all, if you're having trouble finding housing, you're probably also struggling to feed yourself. And if you're experiencing homelessness and/or food insecurity, you will undoubtedly have struggles with your mental health as you deal with that daily trauma. Of course, there are other factors that contribute to mental health challenges too. The difficulty of their college studies, their immigration status and the national climate, interpersonal issues with family, friends, or romantic partners. These factors are all linked and layered. In addition, cultural stigmas make it a challenge to even come forward when one has a mental health issue. I've heard from CSU students of Southeast Asian background, for example, who carry a significant cultural stigma in seeking help with respect to their mental health. This type of stigma only compounds the issue of mental health for these students and others who experience similar issues in their communities and households. Students have worked hard for the past few years to try to expand mental health resources on campuses, but unfortunately, we have not been successful enough. We know that the national standard for mental health counselors on a college campus is 1 mental health counselor per 1,500 students. However, only 13 of our 23 campuses have anything close to or under that range. And at some campuses, the ratio is much higher. At Fresno State, San Francisco State, and Cal State LA, the ratio is 1 counselor to more than 3,000 students. These ratios mean that on many campuses, to deal with the lack of mental health counselors, students report wait times of up to a month to see a counselor in person, and there's often a cap on their visits throughout the year. That means that if I go and I put my name on the list and they call me in 3 or 4 weeks and I go see a counselor, and I make a connection with this person and I finally feel that I can open up and speak about my difficulties, that person then has to turn to me and say, I'm sorry, I can only see you 6 more times this year, and I can refer you to an outside clinic. if you can get the transportation to get there and if your insurance covers it. That's unacceptable. No student, when they have found the courage to come forward and acknowledge their mental health issues, should have to wait so long and have such a lack of access to the help that they need to be safe and successful on their campus. Lastly, on this topic, on all campuses, student fees are being used to pay for these mental health resources. This means that the most obvious way to expand these needed resources on campus is to increase these campus-based fees. But this only compounds the cycle of affordability and mental health challenges. Students are struggling with food costs, housing costs, and rising tuition and fees. If the only solution with respect to mental health is to exacerbate another issue, that is not an acceptable solution. I want to thank all of you for allowing me to speak to you today on these critical issues. I also want to thank the other student representatives who are here speaking today on the issues of equity and student success and the total cost of attendance. All of these issues are intertwined, and I feel so privileged to work alongside you to represent all California college students in trying to solve these issues in partnership with our state and institutional leaders. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maggie. And Maggie had mentioned that, maybe it's just this younger generation that's soft. And can I presume, Maggie, that you were born in 1998 or before?
95.
All right, so Maggie and I are both members of the same generation. We're both members of the millennial generation. We've created a millennial caucus in the state legislature. And for fear of offending most of the people in here, for the millennial generation and the current generation of college of undergrad students, I'm forgetting the name of today's current generation. What do we call y'all? Generation social media. That's what we're going to call you. No, what is it? Generation Z. It is harder to get into college. It's harder to graduate in 4 or 5 years. It costs more to attend, and graduates are graduating with more student debt than ever before. And so I can't, you put it incredibly eloquently, Maggie, and I really appreciate you doing that. Before we move on to Tim Galarno, I just want to introduce my colleague and friend, Jose Medina. Assemblymember Medina is chair of the Assembly Higher Education Committee and has been working with me on the master plan, the select committee on the master plan for higher education. When I first approached Mr. Medina about this, I said, yeah, I'm interested in kind of revising the master plan. If it takes, I just gotten elected, if it takes 10 or 12 years, that's how long it's gonna take. And Mr. Medina said, I term out in 8 years, let's do it before then. So we've sped up the time frame a little bit, but Mr. Medina, I want to give you a chance if you want to say any introductory comments or perfect. So I'd like to introduce Tim Galarno. Tim is the University of California Basic Needs Co-Chair at UC Santa Cruz. Hey, Tim.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I'm not part of the generation of technology, but I'm working on it here. Let's see, open. Almost there. Using a Mac too, the PC world is new and ambitious. Where do I launch this? Slideshow, all right, there we go. This is a village effort, just like basic needs, so this is a good learning point.
That's right.
From the beginning. Okay. So thank you, Select Committee members and attendees. It's an honor to participate in this timely panel and a hearing on ensuring that the California Higher Education Master Plan meets the needs of students across the state, both 2-year and 4-year, public and private. I hope my brief remarks will contribute to your understanding of the basic needs challenges facing students today, as well as what we're doing across the University of California and our partners to advance solutions. So I myself am a community college graduate. I GETC to UC Santa Cruz. I returned to school after a few years, worked 38 hours in northern Santa Barbara, commuted 30 miles to school. So I get a sense of this and really appreciate this work. And I'm in it for the long haul, as well as many of us that go through our public education system. So I just want to extend that and acknowledge, so the University of California itself, as I began to really look at it as a system, I mean, it comprises over 230,000 students, 150 academic disciplines, 600 graduate degree programs on 10 campuses, serving undergraduates, graduates, and professional students. So as we engage in basic needs, we have to think about those 3 student populations and how we're developing and responding to all of their needs. So a clear challenge in higher education today is the impacts of cost of attendance. We've heard that from Spencer and Debbie as well. So today's expenses are other than tuition. They account for more than 60% of the total cost of attending a college and a university. And over the last 4 decades, the cost of living for college students has increased by over 80%. Peter Heinrich, senior research economist at the Federal Reserve, best summed up the struggle for students in relation to the number of hours they need to work to cover their cost of attendance. So 35 hours a week, compared to just a few decades ago, it was factored in that you could succeed as a student and work 10 hours. Mm-hmm. So we need to account for that and think about how we're being responsive to that change in trend and its alarming implications. So that means older generations were able to pay for much more than millennials, as past wages now today cover only 1/3 of the costs of attendance. Further, the Institute for College Success and Access and Success, TICAS, noted in their What College Costs for Low-Income Californians that it would take up to 37 hours a week at the high end for students to cover the cost of attendance if they received no financial aid and had to cover all their expenses by working. So the increased cost of attendance do affect student and food and housing security. According to the USDA, food security is measured by identifying food secure, low and very low food insecurity. So low food security is a factor of the quality and very low is a factor of quantity. So just to break that down for folks. And food insecurity itself is defined as limited or uncertain availability of nutritionally adequate and safe foods, or the ability to acquire such foods in a socially acceptable manner. So the question sets in the USDA designed to assess the validity of food insecurity are 18, 10, or 6-item question sets that are used nationally. So to start with understanding family food insecurity through census data, we find that families across the U.S. on average are suffering 14% low and very low food insecurity combined. So when we look at studies in higher education, the results are noticeably more significant. So between 2009 and 2016, there were a total of 9 studies on the prevalence of food insecurity in college campuses, with an average food insecurity of low and very low totaling 48%. So there's a signal right there that there's something of a, I guess you could call it canary, a very bright canary to attend to. And all in all, food insecurity was assessed in less than 10,000 students at that time, which is very low compared to the expected 20 million college students projected by the National Center for Education Statistics as of fall 2015. So my colleagues will speak to a broader national community studies on community colleges from the Hope Lab at Temple University shortly. But I'm hoping that just giving the context of the national landscape and the studies, we can then begin to look into California and what we're learning here. So with these challenges and data points in mind, the University of California has committed to drawing upon campus and system-wide leadership to advance an upstream approach to addressing student basic needs. So through President Napolitano's National Global Food Initiative, launched in 2014, we've worked to align existing student support services and programs within a food access and basic needs framework. Our initial efforts sought to reach the scale of need and to develop and implement and assess interventions to address student food insecurity, as well as begin to better understand the housing and homelessness dimensions of basic needs for our students. So from 2015 to 2018, we've centered efforts across research, prevention and support, advocacy and collaboration, and overall sustainability, which I'll speak to you all today. So the University of California began examining the issue of food insecurity in 2015, starting with the Student Food Access and Security Survey, funded by President Napolitano as part of the Global Food Initiative effort. To increase our response rate, we used the National College Assessment Survey that is already set to be administered on 4 UC campuses. And on the remaining 6 campuses, the UC Institutional Research and Academic Planning Division administered what we call the Got Food Survey. These 2 surveys were administered online in spring 2015 to a random sample of more than 66,000 students across 10 campuses. Of those asked to participate, 8,932 undergraduate students and graduate students responded. And as you can see, our initial findings found that 42% of students were low and very low food insecure, amidst other key findings that can be reviewed in the survey results, shared with the members and online, hopefully, with the materials from this session. From that, the University of California's food security study informed the decision to revise their institutional assessment measures. So these measures include the UC Undergraduate Experience Survey, the Graduate Wellbeing Survey, the Undergraduate Cost of Attendance, as well as a Graduate Cost of Attendance Survey. So with that said, 2016-2017 was an impressive year for research and advancement on our basic needs efforts. By improving and expanding the cost of attendance survey for undergraduates and launching for the first time ever a cost of attendance survey for graduate students. In addition, 4 qualitative studies about student basic needs experience were completed at UC Berkeley, UC San Francisco, UC Davis, UCI, and UCLA. The UC Undergraduate Experience Survey team and the Graduate Wellbeing Survey team also incorporated food insecurity and homelessness questions into their surveys, based upon this larger interest and attention to the issue and attempting to be responsive and informed, and to help our efforts be more specific with the data and the research to inform who we're best serving. And so it was raised around particular demographic identities combined have increased need, or food insecurity, housing insecurity, and homelessness. So that level 3 data is part of the results that we don't have time to speak about today, but it does inform how we're serving the most at-risk populations as a priority in our solutions. So 44% of undergraduate and 26% of graduate students reported having experienced food insecurity, which is in line with our 2015 findings of 48 and 25% respectively. So what we did with those questions is we brought it from 8,900 students to over 66,000 students, which serves as a database for undergraduate and graduate students to research and inform and engage this really timely issue of basic needs. So our prevention and support in 2014-2015, our food access and basic needs subcommittee initiated campus-level working groups to better assess student needs at our campus level, as well as to inform system-wide efforts. In recognizing there's a growing concern around student food security, President Napolitano allocated $75,000 per campus to address the immediate challenges of ensuring student access to nutritious food, while myself and my co-chair, Ruben Canedo from UC Berkeley, developed a multi-year strategic plan with our campus leadership. The NPI study of 2015 informed efforts to improve our data collection, as discussed earlier, across our institutional student surveys, activating central leadership, and providing the capacity to better assess high-risk student populations based on campus-level specific data. And further, the President committed an additional $3.3 million over 2 years through 2016-2018 to provide emergency assistance, financial aid, and food literacy and life skills trainings, and to strengthen the impact of food access and basic needs working groups' efforts on each campus. The Food Access and Security Basic Needs Subcommittee, sponsored by GFI and overseen by our UC Office of Student Affairs, has established these working groups on each campus, and they include equitable representation from undergraduate, graduate students, staff, faculty, and community partners, because again, it does take a village, PowerPoint or basic needs. Led by our GFI co-chairs, our food access and basic need working groups have been working closely together to address the challenges and develop implementation plans to specifically address the unique needs of each respective campus. So over the last 2 years, we've made significant headway on our food access and basic needs efforts. And this includes hosting semi-annual system-wide basic needs meetings, facilitating monthly system-wide leadership calls and quarterly professional development webinars to better respond and engage our students in successful solutions. Releasing our Student Food Access and Security Toolkit on campus level and security interventions. Establishing a basic needs outcome and impact evaluation and reporting system with timelines for campus efforts. Providing over 22,000 students with direct basic needs services and support on campus. Launching central online websites and communication resources for basic needs on all UC campuses. Already establishing 4 basic needs resource centers, with several more campuses going online by fall 2018. So there are multi-service centers for financial aid literacy, advising and resources, technical assistance, and choice-based pantry selections. And engaging CDSS and Calfresh awareness, and enrolling 8,000 students in Calfresh. And we've recently released the UC Food and Housing Security Report in December 2017, which can provide more detail to what I'm sharing. Just very briefly on one additional support, just looking at the aid the UC provides our students, complemented by Cal Grant and the federal aid, we're trying to provide the best packages for our students. And even that, you've heard the data of what our students are struggling in. So I really am compassionate and connect with the struggles of our sister sectors and our students therein. Our advocacy and collaboration really has extended across informing legislative policy, and we really appreciate the state's investment and concern. Our national engagement, as we've traveled over 34 conferences and meetings to build a network of higher education aware of the possibilities to change the struggles of our students and make solutions possible for all. And strengthening the partnerships across CDSS, our food banks, our homeless youth services, and our sister sectors, which I have to give credit to. It's so exciting to be on a panel with Colleen and Denise. We've had strategic engagement to really think about what we can do across our sectors and be responsive. And the three areas are developing a basic needs vision together in higher ed, building a proactive communication and engagement system, which can help inform pending policy and other elements that come up, as well as sharing our institutional research and analysis to ensure that we're better asking the questions that will inform how we help our students succeed from one system to the next. In going forward in the UC, our model really is to flip the pantry at the bottom. That's a crisis resolution. Our proactive work needs to go before they come to college, whether it's at a community college or state or UC. Our early outreach programs need to understand basic needs, financial aid literacy, how to understand housing, rental markets, and what independence means as a student as you come into your own sense of identity and growth in a university system, and then work on the campus level resources, which we're proactively doing. So we're working ourselves up the pyramid into what we'll be launching in the next phase of our work as the president has called for a basic needs master plan for the University of California. So just in closing, I'd like to thank the committee and attendees and our partners, and the University of California stands with the state and the CSU system and the community college system to comprehensively combat basic needs challenges that affect our students and families statewide. And we look forward to providing any additional materials and resources to inform the important work of this committee. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tim. And now I'd like to introduce Dr. Denise Bevely, Director of Student Wellness and Basic Needs Initiative at the California State University, Office of the Chancellor.
All right.
While you're pulling this up, I'll tell a joke. So we have interns in the district office, in our assembly office. They're high school students, and they were teaching me how to use Snapchat. And we joke that they'll teach me how to use Snapchat, I'll teach them how to use a desktop. So it looks like we're ready?
We are ready.
Perfect, all right, good timing.
Good afternoon. My name is Denise Bevely, and I'm tall, so let me move this up. And I am the Director of Student Wellness and Basic Needs Initiatives for the CSU. Thank you for this opportunity to share some work that's being done across our 23 campuses to help students who experience challenges with basic needs, particularly food and housing insecurity. Food and housing insecurity impacts many California college students, just as it affects countless communities across the nation. A recently released national study found that 48% of student respondents reported food insecurity within the previous 30 days. And of those, 64% also reported experiencing some level of housing insecurity. In 2015, the CSU commissioned a phase 1 snapshot study of a small student population that found that approximately 1 in 5 students experience food insecurity, while 1 in 12 experience housing insecurity. We recently completed phase 2, a more robust, first of its kind study released in February 2018, which confirmed much of the data from the snapshot study. I know most everyone in here is probably somewhat familiar with the California State University. Many of you have friends and family who have likely graduated from the CSU. But in brief, across our 23 campuses, we have almost 500,000 students who comprise of the most ethnically, economically, and academically diverse student body in the nation. More than half of our CSU students are students of color. 1 in 3 are the first in their families to go to college, and 52% of undergraduates are recipients of the Pell Grant. The CSU is a powerful engine of social mobility, providing students an opportunity to earn a high-value degree and enter the workforce prepared for the future. Our commitment to CSU students and their academic and future success necessitates a commitment to supporting their basic needs. When students' basic needs are not addressed, it can have an impact on both their personal and academic growth, impeding their ability to achieve their goals and earn a degree. That is why student well-being is a priority in our Graduation Initiative 2025. The CSU's plan to ensure that all students have the opportunity to be successful and graduate in a timely manner, positively impacting their future and producing additional graduates to power California's economy and innovation. The results from the snapshot study were a call to action for the CSU, that we must do more to help our students who need it the most. And I am proud to say that that call was answered across the CSU. Our campuses have been hard at work linking students to resources, services, and programs that address food insecurity, housing displacement and homelessness, and financial crisis. For students struggling with food insecurity, all 23 of our campuses have either a food pantry or a food distribution program. All campuses provide Calfresh application assistance to eligible students so that they might have healthy eating options. And a majority of our campuses offer meals through meal sharing and meal voucher programs. For example, Fresno State offers a comprehensive food security program that includes an on-campus food pantry, a meal sharing program, Calfresh outreach and application assistance, and a campus garden that provides students with access to fresh fruits and vegetables. Additionally, Fresno was one of the first campuses in the nation to develop an app that alerts students to available food that is left over from on-campus events, preventing food waste and providing an opportunity for students to receive free food. CSU campuses also provide students with short-term emergency housing. More than 2/3 of our campuses offer on-campus emergency housing or vouchers for off-campus housing. For example, at CSU Chico, staff provide students facing emergency housing crisis hotel vouchers to provide short-term relief, and the campus will serve as a co-signer on lease agreements to help students transition into long-term housing. Similarly, Northridge will provide funding for security deposits to help students in need of procuring housing. In addition, CSU campuses also provide financial assistance to students in need. More than 80% of CSU students receive some form of non-loan aid. But beyond federal, state, and instructional financial aid programs, the majority of our campuses also offer emergency grants and funds. For example, San Jose State offers emergency grants for students that they are not required to repay. Sacramento State also offers emergency grants and hosts financial literacy workshops to teach students about money management and budgeting. And many of our campuses have targeted fundraising campaigns aimed at raising funds for basic needs resources. For example, at CSU East Bay, the campus and associated students work together to establish a campaign to solicit donations from the community in support of students' basic needs. In the first year alone, more than $160,000 in donations were secured, as well as over 1,800 meal swipe donations, 1,900 donated items, and $4,500 in emergency aid. These are just a few examples of programs, services, and outreach that exist across the CSU. System-wide, we are implementing the CSU Basic Needs Initiative to coordinate services across campuses, helping them reach all students in need of support. The initiative is structured around 5 areas. The first is addressing the immediate needs of students. The second, growing campus-based basic needs services so they can reach additional students. The third, scaling best practices from one campus to across the system. The fourth, working with partners and collaborating. And the fifth is ensuring long-term sustainability of basic needs services. In February, just last month, we had our System-Wide Basic Needs Initiative Conference, which brought together close to 300 attendees to share current best practices, learn from national experts, and develop action plans for further program development to address students' basic needs. Assemblywoman Weber provided powerful, inspiring words challenging us to continue working towards eradicating student hunger and homelessness on our campuses and throughout the country. And on that note, I would like to also thank you and legislative colleagues for your support of our efforts. The $2.5 million recently allocated to all 3 of the higher ed systems in California through Senate Bill 85 has been very helpful. In the CSU, those dollars are being distributed to all 23 campuses to help them be designated as hunger-free. These funds are critical in helping campuses develop, implement, and enhance resources related to food insecurity and housing displacement. We are proud of the vision our campuses have taken to address these concerns head-on and continue to support their efforts from the Chancellor's office. We also know that there is much more to be done and look forward to working with our local, state, and federal legislative allies to help us ensure that all students are able to have the opportunity to be successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bevely. And Dr. Bevely mentioned Dr. Weber, who's a Assembly member from San Diego, who's also on the Select Committee for the Master Plan. She wasn't able to be here today, but she's been very engaged throughout the whole process. And I'd like to introduce Colleen Ganley Hammerman, Program Specialist for the California Community College Chancellor's Office. Hi, Colleen.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having us. I'm shorter than Denise, so I'm going to pull that a little bit lower. Thank you. Thank you to the committee for allowing us to come and share some information with you. My name is Colleen Ganley Hammerman, and I'm with the Community College Chancellor's Office, and my work buckets include food, housing, mental health, foster youth, homelessness for our students. So it's a pretty tall charge, but I'm very excited that our office specifically hired someone to work on these issues. First time that I'm aware of that there's been someone designated to work on these issues. So a little bit about our system. We are 72 districts, 114 colleges, and we serve 2.3 million students. And I think it is noteworthy that of that total student population, 2/3 are considered part-time students, meaning they're taking less than 12 units. And these students are often working adult students. They are parenting students. They are students that are working multiple jobs to make ends meet. We also have a demographically very diverse student body. In 2017, our Board of Governors formally adopted a new vision for success for our system. Listed on this slide are the metrics that are driving that new vision for success. I won't go into great detail, but I have provided a link about each of these metrics and the timeframes established for this new vision for success. Let's see here. And I want to shift to talk a little bit about basic need data that we know nationally and at the state level. Oops. So nationally, the Wisconsin Hope Lab conducted a survey in 2017. That survey included 70 community colleges across the country. We had 14 California community colleges participate in that survey. And the data shows that 2 in 3 community college students report being food insecure, 50% report being housing insecure, and 13 to 14% report being homeless. And while we do not have statewide data that reflects the community college student body, one of our larger districts, Los Angeles Community College District, who participated in the Wisconsin Hope Lab, polled almost 6,000 of their students. Almost 63% report being food insecure, 55% report being housing insecure, and a whopping almost 19% of the students in the Los Angeles Community College District report being homeless, which to me is quite staggering, especially given the fact that, generally speaking, we don't have housing resources in the community college system. We have 11 districts that offer housing resources, on-campus dorms. So this rise in awareness about these issues is a call to action for our office and also for the other segments. We conducted a basic needs survey across our campuses, asking faculty, staff, and administrators what kind of resources were available to college students to help meet their basic needs. We had 105 responses, 239 individual respondents. And this is what they told us about food pantries. 68% reported having food pantries on campus. Almost 62% reported having support for Calfresh enrollment on campus, and almost 61% reported other available food resources, including meal vouchers, grocery gift cards, farmers market products. And so you might ask, how are we funding these efforts? Generally speaking, there are not designated resources to address the basic needs for community college students. Fortunately for us, and as Denise alluded to, we got $2.5 million of one-time funds for food security activities on our campuses. We also received a one-time apportionment of $4.5 million for mental health services. And I'll talk a little bit more toward the end of my presentation about what we're doing around mental health services. But I want to jump into the hunger-free campus activities. These funds were allocated to support either creating or expanding your campus-based food pantries, and also ensuring that students have information about Calfresh benefits. All of the community colleges that are willing to facilitate these two activities are eligible to get these funds. In preparation for this work, our office hosted 11 regional Calfresh enrollment trainings across the state. We had 82 community colleges send faculty, staff, and administrators to these trainings. We reached over 500 with a day-long training with the goal of training faculty and staff about the application process and what are the barriers that students typically experience. The demand was overwhelming. We would like to do additional trainings, but there was such a hunger across our system from faculty, staff, and administrators to understand what are the barriers that students are experiencing when applying for Calfresh, because it's not just as direct as filling out an application. There's multiple steps, and there's lots of things that the students need to do to actually access the benefits. We are also offering technical assistance to the colleges. We are connecting Calfresh staff at the county level with colleges. We are connecting local food banks with the colleges. We have joined our sister segments on an intersegmental policy research work group, and we've also assembled a small, nimble, and mighty internal work group with leadership from the system and from the community colleges themselves to work on these issues. We work with external partners, including the Department of Social Services, USDA. We have a blossoming relationship with CSU Chico on getting some federal reimbursement for Calfresh outreach activities on campus, and that's new to our system. We're very excited to be hosting our first ever Basic Needs Summit. It's going to be in Sacramento on April 26th and 27th. And so I want to switch back a little bit and talk about mental health services and what we're doing in that effort. I would say when I was listening to the folks talk about the ratio of mental health providers to student numbers, generally speaking, we have maybe 1, 2, or 3 practitioners at the outermost to serve 30, 40, 50,000 students. So there is a real need. I think the legislature recognized that and included some funding, some one-time funding, but we have very, very limited resources to support many, many students who have stress and depression and anxiety. Thank you. So we had $4.5 million. We facilitated a request for application process. We're in the process of approving those. Here we go. The goals of that are to provide direct services, to train faculty and staff, and to help colleges get connected with their county government, their county behavioral health. There's a few statewide system resources that our office is sponsoring. We have a suicide prevention gatekeeper training that we've had available to the community colleges for about 6 years. We've got, there's 3 student-facing modules and 3 faculty staff-facing modules. To date, we've trained almost 70,000 people. We are collaborating with an organization, a national organization called the Crisis Text Line. where they provide text-based mental health services. We created toolkits, and hopefully any community college that you go to, you will see these incredible posters and business cards and keychains and any kind of collateral material to let students know about this service. It's a free service. And so far, we have just under 2,000 students who have accessed this service. We're very proud of the relationship with the Crisis Text Line. And then finally, we are working with our Health Services Association and our Online Education Initiative, and we're developing student-facing modules in Canvas, which is our online education platform. And this is just a small sample of the topics, so when a student logs into their Canvas account, whether it's to get their grades or whether it's to get any of the materials or to even access their classes, they will see a list of about 25 or 30 modules that really delve into all of the things that could be impeding their academic progress. So those are some system-wide resources that we're very proud of, given the limitations on what we have to work with. So there's my contact information. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you, and thank you to the students. It takes a lot of courage to come up and talk in front of this group.
Agreed. Thank you very much, Colleen. And with that, I'll kick it open to my colleagues for any questions or comments they might have. Dr. Ramblin?
Sure. I would feel remiss not to humble brag a little bit about Fresno State and the work that Mary Castro, our First Lady, has done. It shows the true need that we have within our valley, and it reminds me of a quote from Cesar Chavez, that he finds it ironic that we pick fruits and vegetables to fill others' table to such abundance, and yet have so little left for ourselves. Growing up here in the Central Valley, in the breadbasket of the world, it's truly a shame that our Fresno State students have such great need. In the past 18 months alone, they've used that food pantry 50,000 times. And it shows that we as a state have a responsibility to try to help out. As the budget sub-chair of Subcommittee 1, I oversee the Calfresh department and wanted to ask a question about that if I could. I wanted to follow up and understand if there were specific improvements on functionality. Could we help to improve this government service and make it more accessible for our students? And if we can follow up after the fact and have specific recommendations and ideas on how to do that, I'd like to. There is a bipartisan group right now that are working to make improvements within Calfresh, both to increase benefits, but also to make it work better for our communities. So with that, I just wanted to say thank you for your testimony and appreciate what you brought today.
Thank you, Dr. Rambula. Senator Allen.
Well, I just want to, first of all, appreciate the extraordinary work that has been described. I mean, with limited resources, it seems like all three of the systems are stepping up and trying their best to, figure out ways to address some of these, pretty unnerving challenges that exist with our students. And there's certainly a lot of work to be done and a lot of gaps in the system, as were very ably described by our two student speakers, but I'm glad to see the systems stepping up and taking this issue very seriously. I will say, I've seen Maggie White, as I'm the chair of the Education Committee. She's come and testified a couple times, both there and also at the budget sub, and I'm certainly hoping that by the time I term out of the Senate, I will see her in the legislature, because she really has been a tremendous student leader, both at the board level and also as president of the California State Students Association, and I think you have office. I think you got it in you, so I hope to see you join us. I wanted to ask Mr. Galarneau just one quick question about the food insecurity data. When you mentioned that 42% of the California UC students are food insecure, there's another line in your slide that says child history food insecurity is at 23%. Is that to mean that that 23% of the students in the UC system experienced food insecurity before they got to college when they were kids?
Correct, in that it's beyond that, so it's not just limited resource. Students that come from all different sectors, they may choose to have a same-gendered partner and their family writes them off, or they have a different life decision that then cuts them off, but from FAFSA, they're still dependent. But what we're finding is that there are all forms of insecurity that does not directly correlate to child food insecurity. And so we have a lot more data, and with 8 minutes, I could only share so much.
So, but effectively, so but as part of the point you're making here is that out of those those students who are food insecure, nearly half of them, this is actually a relatively new experience.
Precisely, yes, yeah.
Uh-huh. And they're both very difficult things to have gone through, for sure. But, and both kind of present their own challenges.
That's correct.
And the idea is that, these are, that for the folks who were not food insecure but now are when they get to school, that, because they're basically their parents have kind of said, hey, you're 18 now, you're off in college, you're taking care of yourself, and they don't have the resources to.
Correct, yeah,
Right.
the struggle is real for them. And the pre-college basic needs literacy is non-existent. We don't have the capacity currently in K through 12 to prepare our students, so that they have no inclination of where to go or what to do. So our first, commitment was to get the communication, centralize the resources, and let students know that we're here for them.
Okay, all right, I appreciate that. That's very interesting.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. You good? I guess one question I had, one comment and then one question. One comment is, I really appreciated, folks talking about student mental health needs, and I've been focusing, I represent a district and some communities that have really struggled with youth mental health issues, and we focus a lot on high school students and junior high school students. But as I think about it, we've had 2 youth suicide clusters in the past 8 years, and in both of those, there was also some recent graduates of high school, and so college students. And so I'm gonna work with my staff to figure out if we can integrate the higher education systems into some of the work that we've been doing, and the work that we're doing this year. If you could give a bunch of you, or really all of you, had certain recommendations or alluded to problems, and I can guess what the recommendations would be, but if you could just give us 1 or 2 recommendations of either changes to the master plan or things that the legislature can do to address the issues that you're either facing personally as students or seeing as administrators on campus, what would those be?
I'll start. Thank you so much for that question. I really appreciate that. There's 20 floating around my brain right now, but I'll try to just very quickly choose 2. I'm going to look to Dr. Bevely. Was it $3 million that the systems received just recently?
2.5.
It was $2.5 million. I think having earmarked funds for our schools around mental health counseling, and if it can't be for every single campus, particularly in my case for the CSUs, for those 10 campuses that don't have that ratio yet of the 1 to 1,500, looking at those Fresno State, Cal State, LA, San Francisco State, looking at those schools and trying to, as a very first step, getting those ratios from 1 counselor to 3,000 or more students to at least 1 to 1,500. I think that makes a real difference. And I think the campuses have already done an amazing job of advertising those services, but then they get overwhelmed and they don't have the resources to back it up. Because I think this generation, something that's so amazing about us, I'll throw myself in there, we're a lot more willing to talk about our problems. And maybe that's due to social media. We feel that we can really put things out there and seek help. But if we get to that point where we're seeking help and we're in a way rejected, I think that has long-lasting consequences for the individual. So making sure that the campuses can have the resources to back up those promises of basic needs, and particularly for mental health counselors on those impacted campuses. And secondly, I know that there's been a lot of attention to the food pantries on different campuses. I keep referencing Fresno State because we just visited last week, and I had a chance to tour the food pantry, and it was fantastic. And I know they're going to use some of that money that was just received recently to put in more refrigeration units, more shelving, more produce. And when I walked in and I saw students so freely using it without embarrassment or anything like that, just shopping through the aisles for produce, for bread, I would love to see that scale on every single campus. because if you haven't had a chance to go, it's absolutely fantastic. It's Jessica Medina, who's one of the people who runs it, along with Mary Castro. And just the absolute dedication that we're seeing from the campus to make this something that isn't stigmatized, isn't shameful. You can go anytime and no one's going to question you or means test you of do you really need it. I know that's more campus-based, but I think the legislature can do a lot to encourage that and to fund it in a sustainable way so that we can keep that going for our students.
Thank you very much.
And I would just briefly share, I think adding basic needs to the master plan with clear metrics that work within the intersegmental sector and the legislature so that we can evaluate and measure and report and work together is really exciting. And I think really timely for this generation of work because of the scope of the problem. There's mental health and there's food and housing insecurity. You don't know which one will show first of how to support a student, but we need to align the resources and think about the dotted lines to really connect in between those services in our system. So the second element would be considering the types of policy that can intersect across these. SB 85 is great for the housing or the food specifically. We brought up housing and now we've connected mental health. So it'll be exciting to see what kind of path forward we have with that as well. So thank you for asking that question.
Thanks, Tim.
I agree with everyone who's spoken so far. I would say to add to that is definitely the Calfresh program and opening that up so that there is less red tape and hoops for students to have to jump through. Specifically, the 20-hour work week rule is tough for a lot of students, especially those who are in medical school or having to do internships or things like that. They're not able to work those 20 hours, so there's a lot of red tape around that. The other thing I would add is maybe some legislation around affordable housing around campuses. And even with some of our campuses and around the campuses doing new construction, maybe having something in the contract that speaks to providing affordable housing units for students that are nearby campuses.
Thank you very much, Denise.
I think that sustaining the allocations that have been made to the systems for food security is something that would be very useful. We see an incredible growth across the community college system of colleges really putting together robust food pantries. I would also say that the Mental Health Service Act fund, and this is sort of a one-off, but mental health services is really an issue for our students and for our system. I know there's currently a bill that speaks to using Mental Health Service Act funds in higher education. I think that's certainly worth investigating further and supporting. The Department of Healthcare Services also has a project that has primarily been targeted to K-12 students for many years. It's called Local Education Agency, and it is a program that allows the K-12 system to bill Medi-Cal for mental health and physical health services. We're working with the Department of Healthcare Services, but I'm not sure. It could possibly take a number of years to get the regulations modified to allow community colleges. There was a bill that allowed community colleges back in 2015 to begin billing the LEA Medi-Cal billing program, but there's some regulatory barriers to making that happen, and we currently have 15 community colleges that are interested to start billing, and we have some regulatory barriers to be able to do that.
Thank you.
I would love to follow up, if I could, on the Mental Health Services Act. I have quite a bit of questions about that, as well as the commission, and just want to make sure it's working for our communities. It's just good governance for us to look at. In particular, looking at Calfresh, there is an opportunity this year. I'm going to be working with another assembly member on trying to figure out how to streamline the application and make it work better for us. So would love to follow up on both of those ideas.
Thank you, Senator Allen.
The only thing I want to mention, because we have a lot of higher ed people here today, and we had a little bit of a chat about this at the UC roundtable when President Napolitano came. You brought up the issue of affordable housing near campuses, and of course, one of the things we're looking at, even in the context of today's discussion, is that there are just very different kinds of communities where we have campuses. I mean, there's some where the housing, where the land costs, the development costs are relatively low, at least by California standards. And then you got places like Isla Vista that was mentioned before by UC Santa Barbara, or the area around Westwood, UCLA, Berkeley, I mean, they're just out of control costs that are really, really tough. And I was just really struck by the students' comments about having to pack 12 people into a 2-bedroom apartment. It's just unbelievable. It's like the old tenements of the Lower East Side. But one thing I should mention is that in those communities, it has proven to be very difficult for a variety of reasons to do development. And that's certainly something that the legislature is looking at. But the campuses themselves, the 3 systems actually have a lot of discretion, certainly a lot more discretion, a lot more power over the land use decisions, the construction decisions on their own campuses. They may not feel that way when you've gone through the headaches of trying to build additional student housing on campus because of all the pressures you get from the neighborhood and the community. But as a matter of law, the campuses have a lot more power to do what they want on their own land than any other type of developer. And so, as hard as it may feel to do that sort of development, it's harder to do it sometimes off campus. And I really encourage the campuses to be bold in assessing and addressing their housing needs, on their own land. I will say, just the other day, I was at an event, The Brilliance of Berkeley. The Chancellor of Berkeley came down to Los Angeles to talk about what was happening. A person actually asked a question about student housing costs because it has become such a big problem. And the Chancellor announced, they're going to be doing a lot of work and just pushing forward with student housing on various plots of land that they have around the Berkeley campus. I was glad to see that they're barreling ahead on this, and if there are other campuses who want to have conversations with them, we'd be happy to facilitate, because you do have sovereign powers as public higher institutions of higher education, and I encourage you to utilize those powers.
That's a great point. Thank you very much. Please join me in thanking the panelists. Thank you. And our last panel will be a panel on ensuring equity in student success. And I'd like to introduce Alejandro Lomeli, student at Long Beach City College, Manuel John Cantu, student at Fresno Pacific University, as well as Michelle Siqueiros, president of the Campaign for College Opportunity, and Benjamin Duran, honestly. Executive Director, Central Valley Higher Education Consortium. I got it right the first time. I need to stop doubting myself. South Dakota. I was born in Texas. So thank you very much, and we'll get started with Alejandro.
Great, thank you. So I always notice a generation gap because I live off my computer, so I carry it around everywhere. I'm going to just cover this, if that's okay. No, that's perfectly fine. Colleen, your contact information will just stay up there for it. Oh, there you are. Hey, how's it going? So hello, everyone. My name is Alejandro Lomeli. I am a student at Long Beach City College. I also have the privilege of serving as a vice president in the statewide student organization, the Student Center for California Community Colleges. We are an organization that represents the over 2.3 million students across our system. So you can tell a membership of about 30 members is not quite equitable in regards to student membership, but we try our best to voice the concerns of all of our students in various demographic groups. If I can tell you a little about myself, I can tell you, when I first decided to return back to school after my 1.5-year break, I would never have imagined myself still being here 4 years later. I can tell you that I never would have imagined myself having to drop out of several classes due to conflicting work schedules, as well as, balancing 2 or 3 part-time jobs at a time. And I'm doing that now continuously, trying to balance that on a daily basis. And I never would have imagined myself maybe just this semester specifically having to drop Communication 60 class 3 separate times because it was canceled on me due to just conflicting schedules and class cancellations. And I most certainly would have never thought 4 years from now, earlier, that I would be here at Fresno City College speaking to you all about some issues in regards to student equity and academic success. So this shouldn't be a surprise to some of you, but the time of junior colleges being a 2-year institution is no longer the case. The latest information out of the Chancellor's office is that 6 or 7% of students actually graduate or receive any type of degree within 2 years. In fact, the practice of students taking longer than 2 years is so embedded into our system that a lot of our data tracks students in 6-year cohorts, not giving us enough time to be reactionary and really giving us a sense of what we imagine community college students to be, right? 6-year students. So being from a Latin American background, I sometimes feel myself caught in between two worlds, right? So in my Hispanic culture, we value education at any level, but for many reasons, a lot of my people do not complete or even attempt any type of higher education or la universidad. My mother and father never had the opportunity to attend a high school, let alone a middle school. They were busy immigrating over and joining immediately into the workforce to provide for themselves and their family that was to come. Whenever my family from Mexico comes to visit, they're always asking how school is going, and for the most part are ecstatic that I'm spending any time at all in my higher education journey. We also value the commitment to hard work, and I don't think the thought has ever occurred to my parents that I would never be able to not work while attending college. It's never occurred to them, whether my sister graduated from UC or CSU, that you can only commit to school. They have the mentality that you have to work while attending college, and that's a lot of the culture that we come from, right? We have to have that commitment. On the contrary, so friends from different upbringings often question me about my decisions to take a year off or my decisions to even work while attending a college, right? They bring up the questions about what ifs. What if I decided to go into university, which I had the option to do from straight out of high school? They offer suggestions like maybe you should stop working as much or even altogether. Or they ask me, don't take any breaks in between or just push through. And as much as I'd like to say I have my 10 or 5-year plan is like already mapped out, is the reality is that things don't work out the way I plan them to, and that things don't work out for students the way they plan themselves to do as well. Yes, I should always be focusing on my education. If I really truly wish to be successful, maybe I am spending too much time working. Maybe I am spending too much trying to earn some money and not focusing on my degree. But there should be some form of balance, a balance where I should still be able to fulfill my cultural and work responsibilities while attending school, and then while being able to complete those within 2 and 3 years, right? So what's holding students back? Is it the remediation or basic skills that set students up immediately in a position where they have no other option but to finish a sequence of courses that can easily take 2 or 3 years just to even reach transfer level? Is it course offerings and class schedulings that are unpredictable and sometimes offer zero suggestions for students to move forward from any type of sequence? Is it the cultural piece that sometimes isn't translated correctly when speaking to a counselor who may not look like me or know about the future plans and my expected family values? Is it a lack of financial aid resources to support attending a college that requires a $150 textbook that my professors wrote themselves, so I have no other option of buying it but for my individual college bookstore? Is it the misrepresented sticker price of college, that attending a university that doesn't accurately represent the cost of attendance? Is it even more widespread, as conversations we had earlier, that students have such minimal resources that they're suffering from food and housing insecurity and such unstable living conditions that it's affecting their performance? The answer to improving student equity and academic success around our campuses isn't just fixing a simple issue or placing reactive proposals. Just in remedial education alone, from a report that was provided from the Legislative Analyst Office to some of our members here in March, 3/4 of first-time community college students are determined as unprepared. More than 40% of CSU students are determined as unprepared, and 23% of those first-time UC students are also declared as unprepared. So from the onset, we are alone in maneuvering through an almost archaic website to fill out confusing application questions. We wait in lines for impossible times, only to be told we have to come back in 2 to 3 weeks to meet with a counselor that has a 1 to 700 student ratio. We hope that our financial aid, if awarded, is dispersed early enough to have our books by the second week of class, all while managing to balance a successful work, family, and some of us have a social life. So institutions will tell you that they'll be the first to tell you that they are doing everything they can to improve the idea of academic success for the students, that some students are just simply labeled and just come unprepared. But even if the tools are there, we need to do a better job to show students that those tools really are there and where to find them. So there have been, if I can offer some suggestions on how we can move forward in specific to community colleges. I've been involved in the community college system for a few years now, and I've been involved with a lot of the conversations, and most recently there's been a conversation that's kind of been always a little weird to me, and it's the conversation around moving towards this idea of a 15-unit or a more of a full-time unit load for students, right? 15 units per semester, making it a 30-unit year total. And I know there's individuals will argue that, 15 units or 30 units will get students there faster. But I would argue that students who cannot maintain a full-time status now will not be incentivized by an extra increase in financial aid to push them through, right? Let's say, give a scenario of a single mother, right, working. She's taking 9 units right now, barely making the minimum, not even qualifying for full-time. An additional grant of $2,000 or $3,000 isn't going to keep her from her child, taking care of those family values. And that's the reality that we face for a lot of our students now. We talked about earlier, and Debbie Cocker made a great point that a lot of our students are returning students, and there's a huge number of data surrounding that. And I consider myself a returning student, and I only took a year and a half off. So students who come back 5, 10 years later don't even have the stability or even the generational skills sometimes to even maneuver through our systems. And if we move forward towards a system of, providing more resources to individuals of full-time status of more than 12 units or 15 units, I really urge you all to talk about the reality that might be displacing some of our students now, be displacing those students that aren't even eligible for full-time status now, and even further by providing additional resources to competitors across our system. So another suggestion that I would hope would be to provide an additional focus on maybe the idea of course scheduling and class offerings. And the reality that I face as a community college student, when I first enrolled, I didn't know what classes were going to be offered, a semester ahead of time. And that's the reality that a lot of community college students face. I know CSUs and UCs might be a little different where they can map out a 2-year plan, but I've never understood how we expect students to maneuver a system within 2 years when administrators and faculty leaders can never even plan out a year ahead in their course scheduling. When y'all have a chance to, aside from overall calendars, some colleges do more when planning their class offerings. Sometimes we look at class offerings where it's not really focusing on students from different demographic groups or work groups in regards to evening and weekend classes. I'm always surprised when I visit a UC or CSU campus and I go there in the evening and there's such, a popular student life and it's thriving, and it's so encouraging to see that people are wandering around in the evenings when I visit local community colleges and there's no one past 5 p.m. Offices are closed. Sometimes we extend hours the first or second week of class. But for those students who cannot get those appointments within that first time period are left to work on themselves and work from home and try to figure out, online or maneuver whatever system they have set in place. If we want to continue our conversations in regards to remediation, I'm hoping we can have a meaningful conversation around that. But we also need to be open to the idea that our classroom expectations might not be on par with the reality of some students' academic levels. So the conversations relying, on placement tests to assess students' levels is also changing, right? Multiple measures have come to the forefront of deciding where we believe a student is ready and will be most successful. Things like high school GPA, previous workload, or even a 30-minute counselor visit can have just as enormous effect on whether I have to take 2 semesters of math before reaching a transfer level, or whether I have to keep me from being enrolled in another required class. But what if our idea of placement isn't, entirely accurate? An assessment test can be seen as a way to set cut scores for students' expected achievement levels, but it can also be used as a tool to assist faculty in providing an adaptive course, an adaptive working environment for students. Faculty can finally learn from our data that the students who test into a course and maybe adapt their courses to a more realistic level for student success. This information cannot be made available using high school transcript data, especially for those who don't self-report. An assessment tool might not be the answers to our questions surrounding placement and remediation, but it can be argued that we need more comparable data to go about creating and adjusting reflective courses instead of using outdated metrics that may negatively impact some of our students. So if we hope to continue on successes of past bills like Assembly Bill 705, we must also form an even greater data sharing relationship with our K-12 partners. If remediation is such an issue, where does it start? Is it at the K-12 level? Are we not preparing them from segment to segment? Self-reported data can only get us so far, and with sometimes no way of verifying that information without some validation procedures, there will be some inaccurate placements along the way. And I hope although these partnerships may only benefit those populations coming straight out of high school, a huge portion of our students do come out of that system, and we must encourage those students as well. So the conversations around equity and student success aren't singular issues. Student success is directly related to issues discussed earlier, like college affordability and basic needs. There is no doubt that these issues affect our students differently, some more than others. But if we plan to move forward toward a relevant vision for a 21st higher education system, we must continue to ensure that this plan meets the needs of all of our students, whether they be working adults, single mothers, straight out of high school, different ethnic groups. We must keep that in mind if we plan to move forward towards a better future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alejandro. And next up, we'll have Manuel John Cantu.
All right, hello, everybody. Thank you for hearing us out today, and thank you, committee. It's so refreshing to see that you guys are to see some, like a committee actually hearing us out. When you're a student, you kind of get lost in day-to-day stuff, so it's affirming, I guess. And so my name is Manuel Cantu, and my academic journey starts in a small rural city called McFarland. McFarland is a city that is over 90% Hispanic. And similar to most small rural cities in the San Joaquin Valley, McFarland is home to many low-income and immigrant families. And as a result of the low-income area, the school district could obviously not receive some of the same funding as other property taxes as most affluent areas surrounding McFarland. This means McFarland had facilities and programs that sometimes some might consider subpar. So it is very easy for someone to look at McFarland and perceive it as a dead-end city. And to be honest, that's something I did for so long. I looked at McFarland and I thought, and I didn't appreciate it until I finally matured. And I started to recognize my success in college thus far until I finally, it wasn't until sorry, kind of nervous. So that's how I view my success. It was not until I matured and started to recognize my success in college thus far and started appreciating the role models around me that I realized McFarland was a great place. I realized despite the apparent inequity in McFarland, I still find myself ready and encouraged to succeed in higher education. I was prepared because I was blessed with great parents and a great family. I acknowledge them because they are the real reason for my success. My grandparents immigrated from Mexico with the Bracero program. They had hopes of living the American dream. They would, of course, face many hardships, but they managed to instill the idea of grit and determination into my parents. As a result of their efforts, both of my parents would eventually graduate from college, and my father would also continue to receive his master's degree and become a school administrator. So the stage had already been set for me to be more likely to succeed, but I did not know that. I was always looking at my environment and comparing it to other places and thinking McFarland wasn't good enough. My junior college in Bakersfield wasn't good enough. And then finally, until I matured and went to Fresno Pacific University, that I realized that all those things were good enough. I realized that my parents were a product of small towns like McFarland that I thought so poorly of. All the teachers that I looked up to were parts of those same type of small Hispanic communities. All the faculty members were also part of those small communities. Also, despite the low funding at our schools, many teachers often put extra hours for college readiness programs like AVID, writing workshops for help on personal statements. Now that I look back and I see the value in growing up in McFarland. Role models that looked like me surrounded me and led me to believe that anything could be possible. My experience in higher education has been quite different than high school, of course. The financial burden of college forced me to spend a few years at a local community college. Growing up, I was the oldest, and when you realize that your parents have to finance 4 other students in college, you kind of have to bite the bullet and start off at a community college. But although college was different and it took a while for me to adjust, my parents were always by my side. My parents would remind me to visit my counselor every week because I need to be proactive on my transferring. My parents would remind me, don't be lazy with your extra time between all those classes. They would remind me that in the end, the degree would be worth all the effort. I would eventually transfer to Fresno Pacific within 2 years with 55 units. Since I didn't fully listen to my parents about being proactive with my courses, it would come back to haunt me because I would eventually be graduating in 5 years instead of 4. But I have no regrets. I'm happy with my progress. The good thing about that minor mistake is that my brother would eventually transfer to Fresno Pacific University and learn from my mistakes and be on the right track to graduate immediately. So as I was here at Fresno Pacific University, I saw that it was the home stretch. So I've continued to put my nose down, hit the books, and get the grades I need. And so if I could relate my story to the broader student population, I would encourage students to try and find hope in their environment, no matter what it is. Look for role models that will empower you to do your best. I wish there was a cookie-cutter solution I could offer you and point you in the direction of said role model, but this is a process you have to discover for yourself. I took my parents and other teachers for granted, not until I used them as a resource I began to flourish and become more academically successful. But I think this is also a tool that universities can provide and help fix equity in our communities. At Fresno Pacific University, I was able to learn about many things that can help improve equity and student success. I work at my school as a multicultural peer mentor. This is my favorite job on campus, and I think it is a great step in the right direction to improve equity. As a multicultural peer mentor, I am one of the 6 students that serves as a role model, friend, or mentor to help people that are first-generation college students navigate through higher education. My department is funded by the ALAS program, or the Advancing Latino Academic Success, and the great thing about it is that we serve first-generation college students, so any first-generation student can potentially be a part of our program. First-generation college students can often be lost in universities since they don't have that family member who blazed a trail before them in higher education. They're often not reaffirmed that this is the right decision for them. Their parents do not often understand the challenges that their children may face, and so resentment can grow between parent and child. First-generation students sometimes do not know how to manage their time outside of a high school setting. These students may also prioritize work over studying to help out their family's financial burdens. Students under DACA are also sometimes fearful for applying to government programs in college in general. It can be very scary for students to be experiencing these struggles and realize that their parents cannot help them despite all of their efforts. This can be very discouraging for students, so it is our job to bridge the gap for these students and be that role model to help them stay on the path and as I mentioned, to help them, to give them role models that are wiser and that look like them. We want to be that for our students. We equip all of our students as best we can. So universities should provide students with the opportunity to attend different social awareness programs, be a part of different scholarship programs, and interact with people of different social spheres. Universities need to be able to encourage leaders to be aware and truly represent their student body. I believe students benefit the most when they have mentors they can relate to. That doesn't mean it has to be someone of the same race, but the leader should be competent and considerate enough to hear out their situations. And students should know that if they apply themselves, then they should not be unjustly held from success. Hard work should be the only thing that gauges success. And lastly, if you come from a humble place, use that to your advantage. Showcase your ability to overcome adversity and rise to the challenge. That is a valuable skill set that you get the privilege to have. If you're a person that comes from inequity and succeeds, do your best to become a role model to other people. I drew inspiration from many people who I didn't even know. Every college acceptance letter that I heard about from an upperclassman was a great inspiration to me. Every time I heard that someone transferred to a university in 2 to 3 years, that was a great inspiration to me. Every time I heard about someone getting a job right after college, that was a great inspiration to me. And they may never have even known. So you can, just remember, you can inspire people by your own personal success and the testimony you can share. So let's share a trend of generational success. And I believe that starts at the university level by applying great leaders.
Great points. Thank you, Manuel. Next up, we have Michelle Siqueiros, President of the Campaign for College Opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon now, Chair Berman and members of the committee and everyone here. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this hearing. More importantly, thank you for having the hearing and for the work that you're doing. I just wanted to state for the record, I also was not around in the 1960s. Although my daughter does say that I'm ancient, and on my last birthday asked me how that felt. My name's Michelle Siqueiros. I'm president of the Campaign for College Opportunity. And I used to always say that I was super lucky that I got to college. You see, my mother immigrated here from Mexico with only a 6th grade education. She had no idea how to help me fill out that FAFSA, which all of you should know is due tomorrow. If you want to be eligible for Cal Grant aid, tell everyone you know. Tell every undocumented student that they can still access the DREAM Act. So I used to say that I was lucky that I was able to fill out that FAFSA, that I was encouraged to apply to college, that I ended up going to Pitzer and then to UCLA on an affirmative action scholarship, and that I got out of college with about $16,000 in debt, which was pretty fantastic at that time, given the world-class education I got at both institutions. But now I tell everybody that it's absolutely not at all related to luck. In fact, it's related to everything that you can make happen and that you do as policymakers. because it was policymakers that ensured there was financial aid so I could go to college, that there were student loans so that I could afford to get there and get through. And it was those affirmative action supports that allowed me to go to graduate school and be the first in my family to earn not only a bachelor's degree, but a master's degree. The Campaign for College Opportunity was founded by folks that were around in the 1960s. In fact, David Wolf and Steve Weiner were baby boomers that got to benefit from the master plan promise, got to go to UC for free, if you can imagine, and were dismayed in the early 2000s that our state leaders were not funding higher education sufficiently to make sure that students could have that promise that we've all talked about. So they founded the Campaign for College Opportunity, and our focus and mission has not changed since 2004. And that's that more Californians should have the opportunity to go to college, that once they get there, they should actually complete college, and that we should be unabashed, unapologetic about closing the racial and ethnic gaps that persist in California higher education. Much has changed since we started at the Campaign for College Opportunity 14 years ago. We've done a lot more to grow access in California, but not enough to close the projected 1.7 million shortfall of graduates that we are going to need. In some ways, the good news is more and more Californians are ready to go to college, want to go to college, have completed the A through G requirements so that they can get to college. And yet we continue to turn away eligible students at the UC and the CSU every single day, including today, because we don't fund our universities enough to take them all. In 1995, about 35% of high school graduates completed A through G. Those are the courses that you need to get to college. Today, that number has increased significantly to a record 44%. But there's huge inequality when you break down that figure by race. In fact, white students completed A through G by almost 50%, but Latino students, only 35% of high school seniors who graduate that are Latino can even apply to a UC or a CSU, and only 33% of Black students can apply to a UC or CSU. That's unacceptable. The other thing that's unacceptable are the enrollment caps set by the master plan. We have said that only the top third of Californians should go to a UC or a CSU campus. That worked for the 1960s, but not for today, when more and more jobs require that students actually have a college education. So my ask to you is that you lift the enrollment caps at the UC and the CSU. It should not be harder for our kids to get into college than it was for us, especially since this economy practically requires a college education. The limits of the master plan enrollment caps and inadequate funding for CSU and UC force many students to attend community college first with the hopes of transferring to complete a bachelor's degree. Unfortunately, the route from community colleges to our four-year universities is much more of a maze than a straightforward pathway, as you already heard from our two student leaders here. Although a majority of community college students enroll with the goal of transferring, only 4% do so within 2 years, and only 38% after 6 years. Transfer students will take 6.4 years to earn a bachelor's degree at the UC and 7 years at the CSU. That results in an additional $36,000 to $38,000 in expenses for transfer students compared to freshman admits. The transfer process is broken in California due to the lack of coordination between the segments. California is also unique in its lack of a statewide official or entity that ensures our various segments have to work together more seamlessly. Such an entity must have the responsibility, authority, capacity, staff, and financial resources to be effective in advancing a state agenda for California, not an agenda for the UC, not an agenda for the CSU, not an agenda for community colleges, an agenda for California and its students. That agenda should be to increase college access, attainment rates, to improve transfer and close the equity gaps. We need an entity that keeps the interest of students and the state at the center of any conversation between the segments. The CSU and the UC offer their own version of admission guarantees and 2 different sets of lower division general ed requirements for transfer students. In 2010, as you know, the Campaign for College Opportunity sponsored legislation to establish the associate degrees for transfer, which offers seamless 120-unit paths to a bachelor's degree. Students earning this associate degree for transfer are guaranteed admission to the CSU with junior standing and a bachelor's degree with a guarantee that they won't have to complete more than 60 units. There are now ADTs in 32 majors, with colleges still developing these programs, and we're starting to see the impact. I just want to share one statistic. Students that transfer to a CSU with an associate degree actually earn that bachelor's degree 48% faster than students that transfer the traditional way. They earn it at a 27% rate. There are a lot of efforts to expand the ADT program, and we support them, including those efforts to align with the Western Governors University and also with historically Black colleges and universities across the state. But we need to make sure that we continue to maintain that promise and expand it everywhere. There are other means through which we've failed to design colleges for student success. It's often lamented that many students are not college ready when stepping onto campus, but we must also be frank in asking if colleges consistently prove themselves to be student ready. Alejandro already talked about remedial education, so I'm not going to go into that, but we also sponsored Assembly Bill 705 to ensure that colleges could use more than just the assessment test to place students, by one of your colleagues, Jackie Irwin. Guided pathways is also another means to shape college practices to make sure that more students get to their goals and reach their dreams. As previously mentioned, most students come in with the goal of transferring, and yet they're met with a lot of confusion. Last year, we actively supported the state budget's investment of $150 million budget allocation to expand guided pathways in community colleges. And, you know, it's called guided pathways, but it's simply common sense. Students should arrive in college and not have to guess how they might pull off transfer or get a certificate or degree. On March 5th, we are going to release Left Out: How Exclusion in California's Colleges and Universities Hurts Our Values, Our Students, and Our Economy. This report analyzes the leadership, faculty, academic senate diversity by race and gender of our community colleges and universities. While Latinx students now compose 43% of our undergrads, and Black students another 6% of enrollment in California, only 12% of faculty members across our colleges and universities are Latinx. Only 5% are Black. Leadership roles are still highly exclusive, with whites comprising 60% of senior leadership roles in higher education. More than 60% of our faculty, over 70% of campus academic senates, and over 80% of the system-wide academic senates across our community colleges and universities are white. As leaders who care about improving student outcomes and closing racial gaps and inequality in our own state, let me share that there is no way to do that without ensuring greater inclusivity in our campuses. You heard from both our students, Manuel and Alejandro, about the importance of seeing themselves in the leaders in front of them. All students, white, Black, Latinx, Asian American, benefit from being exposed to the diversity that has made California strong. As policymakers, I urge you to require community colleges and universities to collect and report data by race of their leaders and academic senates. They're only required to do it for faculty and students. That's not enough. We're also urging the governor and the Senate Rules Committee to appoint UC regents, CSU Board of Trustees, and community college board of governor members that are reflective of the population diversity of California and of the number of women in our state. I just want to share a few stats that you'll get to see on Tuesday. The UC Regents has 26 members, only 7 women. 62% are white. The CSU Board of Trustees, 35% women, 70% white. The Community College Board of Governors, 41% women, 77% white. We are the 6th largest economy in the world. We're not going to maintain that standing or that force if we leave people out, if we don't close the racial gaps that persist, and if we don't just talk about how progressive we are as Californians, but act on it. The California dream is premised on the idea that any of us can imagine and create a brighter future. We'll only honor the dream by ensuring our children can partake in the same opportunities that past generations were able to. You started this hearing by talking about the promise. Promise as a noun means a commitment to do something. I urge you to use it as a verb, which means you will do something. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle. And next is Ben Duran, Executive Director, Central Valley Higher Education Consortium.
Thank you. Hey, while I try to find this, where's the, I'm trying to shut it out so I can. So we're doing this. I was around in the 60s. I remember the 60s. Great time.
You don't remember all of it.
For those of them for the parts of the 60s you can remember. So I'm from the Central Valley Higher Education Consortium, and I came today to talk to you about equity and about student success. And when we talk about equity, and which arrow am I going to do now? Okay. When I start talking about equity and student success, what we're talking about is truly the fact that the two are married. I have a good friend of mine who says everybody is everybody. All is all. We don't do cohorts. We don't. So I'm going to tell you about what we're doing in the Central Valley. The Central Valley, who are we? So the Central Valley is a group of colleges and universities from Stockton all the way down to Kern County, from San Joaquin County down to Kern County. Includes 14 community colleges, 4 community college district offices, the 3 California state universities in the region. It includes the University of California, the 10th campus of the system, and it includes 5 of our independent colleges and universities in the valley. So we come together as a single voice, and it's a unique organization in that our board of directors are the presidents and the chancellors of the institutions. So that when we come together and we try to speak with one voice. What we have listed here, what I have listed here, are a number of partners that we've been partnering with here in the Central Valley to bring student success and equity, because we think that you have to be equal. If you're going to be equal and inclusive, then it's got to be student success across the board, right? It can't just be some other. So I'm not going to, because I'm mindful of the time also. But back in 2016. Our board of directors had a summit. In fact, Assemblyman Arambula was there, and he was like all fired up because we were showing data. We were showing data that was very, very specific about what we needed to do as colleges and universities in the Central Valley to lift all of our youngsters. Again, equity, to bring them all up. And so there were a number of things that came out of that summit that I wanted to talk to you about. So the first strategy that we're doing across the board, we're trying to scale this thing up across the board, is a co-requisite remediation we call it co-requisite remediation. Different folks call it different things, but I'll tell you what it is in a second. It's co-requisite remediation in mathematics and in English. What we know is that when young people get stuck at the gateway, at the community colleges, we have this huge group of students who get to the gateway to transfer and never do. 92% of them never transfer because they can't get past college algebra. They couldn't get past that grade. And then time is the problem, because if you're in the community college, if you have to stay there another year and a half, 2 years, then we start losing folks. There's a study from the Public Policy Institute of California that tells us that when they studied the Inland Empire, Los Angeles, and the Central Valley, that in a 5-year period, now get this, so for the legislators, oh my gosh, we spent all that money and we really didn't get anywhere. 300,000 students got to the gateway and never crossed into transfer. That was in a 5-year period for just those three areas of California. So you can imagine what's going on in the rest of the state. So that isn't equity, right? That isn't right. That isn't okay for X number of students to get there and not be able to get into the promised land, to not be able to cross over. So our colleges and universities are implementing co-requisite remediation. Alejandro spoke to it a bit, and about this notion about, hey, how do we place students? The Assembly passed AB 740. It's been referenced a number of times today. And then Chancellor Tim White did this really gutsy thing, and he signed an executive order requiring multiple measures also at the California State University system. So now, in the California State University system and in the community colleges, there is a requirement for placing students in these gateway courses using multiple measures. But as a result of that, in the CSU, they're also being required to implement co-requisite remediation, and the community colleges are moving along. Here in the Valley, we have a movement where these colleges are taking co-requisite remediation and scaling it up. And what that means is that, just very simply for those of you who don't understand it, so let's take English 1A. So those of you who were a lot smarter than me would have taken English 1A and taken a 3-unit class, banged it out, and gotten through. For those people that were not as well prepared, you would take it and probably didn't pass it. Or worse yet, you would get in there, you would take a placement exam, and they would tell your counselor, would say, you're 3 levels below college ready. So that means you had to take semester 1, semester 2, semester 3, before you even got into English 1A, which was no guarantee that you were going to pass English 1A. You go on and on and on. You can see the quagmire, right? With co-requisite remediation, you're placed along with the other folks in English 1A. But instead of, whoever died and said you only have to take English 3 hours a week, there are some of us who need 5 hours a week, right? So there may be the regular 3 hours of English that you're taking with everyone else, and the additional 2 hours might be spent on tutorial, on additional assistance to make sure that you get through, because the course that you're taking has the exact same rigor, has the same requirements as the other folks who got placed in there. So when we look at the data, and that's what Assemblyman Arambula, when he looked at the data, he said, well, why aren't we doing this? Well, and it's true, right? So we're trying to scale that up here in the Central Valley so that when young people get into college, get into the community colleges, that if they take, or the CSU now, that they literally are able to get through the gateway courses and then get on with life. So that's one of the things that we're doing here in the Central Valley. The other one is 15 to finish. Alejandro spoke to it, and he said, there are some folks who can't do it, and that's true. What we don't want to do is we don't want to diminish those folks who can't attend school full-time. There are folks who can't go to school full-time. We understand that. But we also understand, I think Debbie Cochran mentioned, when you look at the research says students who are going to school full-time are completing, and they're completing faster. Time is a horrible thing. Can you imagine if we could get kids through university, through community college and university in 4.5 years, 5 years max, versus 7 or 8? Can you imagine the savings to the state of California that we could direct to other things that we do? So our recommendation is that one of the recommendations would be, getting back to the co-requisite remediation, that since it's now becoming part of what is transforming the colleges, is that we really look at professional learning and opportunities for folks as our faculties are being asked to change the very way they do what they do after having done things one way for a long time. And it'll take a while to implement these things. So when we look at 15 to finish, we're trying to get young people to not only get their financial aid, and you've heard all about financial, I want to get into that. Get all their financial aid, get the benefits from the services, the county and other sorts of things, to give you the opportunity to attend full-time if you possibly can. Our other strategy, and this would be a recommendation, is that the legislature seriously take a look at a longitudinal data sharing platform that would allow us to share data from our K-12 partners to the community colleges, the CSU through the CSU. Right now, they're individual silos that exist out there, and it doesn't make any sense to us. And it's difficult for us to get that data. If we can follow a kid from the 6th grade through the high school into the community college, and literally have the parents also follow them by the way, have the parents follow, have the students follow. We can do that. It's out there. It's simply a matter of doing that. And then the other strategy is, and you've heard the reference to guided pathways. So we're implementing guided pathways across the valley. All of our colleges and universities, including our CSUs and the UC, we're all, and our independent friends, are all picking up the guided pathways, because I think Senator Allen spoke about the wraparound services that the University of California kids get, which is wonderful. But again, everybody is everybody and all is all. So if it's like good for UC kids, why isn't it good for like other kids, right? So with the four pillars of guided pathways, so one of them is intake, getting out there and getting them through and getting them an intake. And Alejandro spoke about going through these horrible websites and trying to, so getting kids in. The other thing is, once you've gotten them in, is to get them to select a path, a meta major, a direction in which they're going to go. The other one, and then another pillar, is to literally give them the intrusive student services. We heard about 1 to 3,000 counselor student ratios, 1 to 1,500, to really literally put some services and some dollars. So these are like recommendations with respect to intrusive student services, to make sure that the students at the community colleges, for instance, are getting those wraparound services that the kids at the University of California get. And then the other is the one I was talking about a while ago, which is the professional learning, to make sure that learning is taking place and that faculty are given an opportunity for professional learning. Do you know, I used to be a K-12 guy. I used to be a superintendent of a high school district before I went to the community colleges. I used to do more professional development and training with my K-12 teachers than our community college folks ever got. Doesn't make any sense. So, I mean, anyway, that's who we are. That's what we're doing here in the Central Valley, and we're doing it because we believe it's equity and it's inclusion for all, and we're trying to lift everyone. That's how you can get a hold of us if you need to. You know?
Thank you very much, and I'm going to kick it open to my colleagues. First, Mr. Medina.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I am Assembly Member Jose Medina. I represent another part of the inland part of the state of California. I represent the Inland Empire, Riverside, Moreno Valley, and the city of Paris. Similar to the area where we are right now, we have a very low college going rate. I think with the Central Valley, the Inland Empire, the lowest college going rate in the state of California. I was around in the 60s. Matter of fact, in 1968, I was a freshman in high school. So I share that with Dr. Duran. And I say that because I was also a history teacher. And today in the Capitol, we did a press conference. Today, March 1st, 2018, is the 50th anniversary. The 50th anniversary of walkouts that took place in Los Angeles. Walkouts that I might think that Alejandro and Manuel may not be familiar with. Walkouts at Lincoln High School, Garfield High School, Roosevelt High School, led by a teacher, Sal Castro. A teacher who I had the opportunity to meet. I had the opportunity to bring to my classroom in Chicano Studies, in my Chicano Studies classroom in the high school. And I bring it up because I heard Alejandro and Manuel talk about the importance of teachers and counselors that look like them, like students. And I bring it up because I hear Michelle Siqueiros talking about our students still not being admitted. I hear Michelle talking about faculty not looking like the students, not being enough Latino faculty, not having enough Latino administrators, not having enough Latinos on the regents of the UC, on the board of trustees of the CSU, of the community college. And guess what? Those demands of those students 50 years ago are the same things that we are talking about today. The same things. Those were the issues that those students talked about, exactly the same things. So I don't say that to discourage us. I actually say that we need their energy, the energy that those students have. And I think we do have it, right? And they were successful. Even though here we are 50 years later and we're talking about some of the things that we don't have, they actually were successful. They changed a culture in Los Angeles where no one really expected us, Latinos, to go to college. They changed that. They turned it around. And they did it dramatically in the number of students that they were able to change. They affected a movement that changed now, that made it possible for me to be in the state legislature, right? I think they created a movement that every single Latino who has ever served in the state legislature owes. So I think it's good that we take a moment to reflect on that, and also to use their example to do better. Because even though there is much that we need to improve on, there has never been a time where we've had more Latinos in higher education, more Latinos in UC, more Latinos in CSU. And I will quote Sal Castro, and I will quote what Sal Castro said when he came to my classroom. He said, "No sea pendejo." If you knew Sal Castro, that's the way he talked. You know, go to college. And about the bottleneck in community college. I was a community college trustee for 13 years. But it's clear, it's obvious that something's going wrong with community college if the majority of Latinos who are in community colleges are not being able to go to four-year colleges. You know, I went to college. My daughter graduated from USC. I'm a graduate of UC Riverside. We both got out in 4 years, and that's because we both had the opportunity to be full-time students and not have to worry about a lot of the things that I heard the students in the first panel have to worry about. But that is what college is meant to be. I think college, and we as the state of California, need to do better. I chair the Committee on Higher Education. I am in the subcommittee on the budget for higher education. It is disgraceful. I think it is disgraceful the amount of money that we invest in higher education. And so I make the point that at the time where there are the most Latinos ever in the history of California in higher education, it is disgraceful that we kind of nickel and dime higher education. I think we're probably preaching to the choir here with my colleagues, but it's up to you. It's up to you as students to put pressure on us to do better. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair Medina. Any other questions or comments from colleagues? I know nobody, it's hard to follow Mr. Medina. But Mr. Rambla has the guts to.
I think you can see why we call him El Profe. You know, I wanted to comment to Manuel if I could. I was impressed with your courage and humility. and it reminds me of my roots as well. My father used to pick grapes in Pixley, and I was born in Delano, so I know McFarland well. And you are right that if you come from a humble place, it's our responsibility to turn around and make sure we're holding that door open for future generations. And I was really proud of you today and your ability to speak to that cause.
Thank you, Dr. Arambula. And with that, I think we're going to wrap up this panel and move on to public comment. Thank you very much, everybody, for participating. So now that we're 35 minutes behind schedule, this is the opportunity for public comment. Thank you, everyone, for your patience and sticking with us so far. We've allotted technically 35 minutes to public comment, but really as much time as we need for everyone to be heard. Elizabeth, will you check and see if the microphone is on? I know we left it off.
Testing.
Perfect, thank you. We ask speakers to limit themselves to 1 to 2 minutes if possible in your comments so that we can hear from as many folks as possible. Thank you for your understanding. And let me also just say, please, if you're in the audience and you want to follow along on the efforts of the Select Committee on the Master Plan and participate in future hearings, don't hesitate to reach out to my Legislative Director, Ellen Green, who's right here, and you can come and introduce yourself and give your contact information to Ellen after the hearing, and we'll make sure that you're put on our email distribution list so that you're kept up to date on what we're working on. So that takes care of that. And with that, I'm going to open up public comment with, and I apologize for Venancio Gaona, Latino Education Issues Roundtable. Perfect, Venancio.
Buenas tardes, good evening. Thank you, Mr. Berman, Arambula, honorable, all of you are honorables. Senator Allen, Mr. Medina, muchas gracias por sus comentarios. Thank you very much for your comments. A lot of ground has been covered. Our organization has here six comments. I'm going to try to limit it to 3. First of all, Senate Bill 1440 was passed in the year 2010. It established the Student Transfer Achievement Reform Act, 60 units to be a student to be eligible to be accepted at a 4-year CSU system. Somehow, some way, institutions, community colleges did not include, say, for example, ethnic studies, Chicano Latino studies. So Senate Bill 440 was passed. Senate 440 says, required the creation of 4 transfer model curriculum templates that allow students a broader area of study than previously available to other associate degrees for transfer. It was passed in 2013, yet some community colleges, we need accountability from you, as Mr. Medina said, that community colleges implement this bill, and not say, oh, students are not interested in Chicano Latino studies. They're not enrolling because it's not part of the 60 transfer units. You need to tell them, have you implemented what is already on the books? Recommendation 2, the master plan. Comments have been made, especially by Ms. Sequeiros and others, about affirmative action, which I call affirmative action in the hiring. We have institutions that 4-year colleges, nearby CSU, that says, oh, well, we have to have only tenured teachers, tenured professors on the screening committee. That's not fair. That's not equity. You need you can't have just one Latino or one African American serving on all the screening committees because he or she is the only one with a degree that is tenured. Finally, the request. Last February 7th, Senator Hueso provided the community the majority report in Sacramento at the Sheraton Hotel. I encourage you, especially you, Assemblyman Arambula, if you could hold this report published by the Education Trust West, have it held here, just like we thank you very much for the fact that you've had this hearing here. I know you listened to us because we recommended that you bring this here. We hope that you come back and that you have many more hearings because there are a lot of concerns. Finally, I'd like to reiterate the comment that was made earlier by Siqueiros and Mr. Duran. We need also representation from the Valley on the CSU, the UC system, and especially the community college Board of Governors, Board of Regents, and the trustees. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Venancio. And next up is Madeline Loudon, UCSB Lobby Corps.
Hi there, my name is Madeline. I'm a sophomore at UCSB. Excuse me, I'll be reading off my phone a little bit if you don't mind. Okay. So a little bit about my background before I got to school. My final years of living at home were overridden with threats of eviction and food insecurity. This is a topic that I've been well acquainted with, unfortunately, for some time before I came to college, and I saw that it afflicted a lot more students than I was used to. I come from Irvine, a really affluent area where this is kept under wraps. Nobody knew that any of this going on between any friends. As a junior in high school, I had to give my mom money that I had earned from my job in order to cover rent and food costs. In my senior year, as my situation at home got worse, and conversations of evictions turned into threats of police coming to our door, I began to struggle with looking forward to the future, and I nearly gave it up to applying to college. Thank God I didn't, or else I wouldn't be standing here right now. When I attended UCSB, I was fortunate enough to qualify for a Pell and Cal grant, and was able to have a more stable living situation than I previously had, which, as Tim had mentioned in the previous panel, a lot of students don't experience. It's often the other way. But that's just it. My security is based on the amount and availability of financial aid, which is decided by stakeholders and legislators, which are just inherently impersonal to students. My well-being is based on the funding and expansion of programs and services on campus, such as mental health and sexual assault resources, food banks, campus health centers, and countless other programs that are supposed to be available to students of completely different backgrounds and diverse groups on campus. From my experience, however, lobbying in Sacramento, many legislators have expressed mistrust and distaste with working with the UC system to address funding issues, which are so pertinent to the success and experience of students here at the UC system. While I understand the reasoning behind their anger, it is very difficult to not feel as if they're trivializing our experience and struggles as students, just as they kind of push it aside as students trying to get involved in a matter that they don't belong in, that they don't understand these conversations, when in reality, every single student that I've talked to understands it much better than people up in the level in Sacramento. These are the lives they live. They're not telling a story from somebody else. That's why I'm here today. We drove from Santa Barbara. We left at 5 in the morning. We've been here all day. We're in midterm season. It's definitely a very interesting time to leave to go to a conference. But I'm here today to ask you to take your efforts a step further, to not just listen to our voices and to enact our interests 10 years from now with the renewal of the master plan, but to actively fight for the needs of college students on the House floors, in your committee meetings, and in your districts, and to enact real change now. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Madeline. And next up is Mary Renner from the Central Valley Health Network.
Good evening, and thank you for holding this committee hearing here. I live in Fresno. Our organization is headquartered in Sacramento, and I can tell you many times I have to travel to Los Angeles or Oakland or Sacramento to attend meetings where I learn about the issues, especially here in the Central Valley. So I really appreciate your being here today. I represent the Central Valley Health Network, which is a consortium of 14 community health centers. So I don't work in education, but we do a lot of work around workforce. And while I recognize the committee had a hearing in San Jose around workforce, I still think that we want to bring home the fact that meeting the needs of students also means making sure that the programs that exist in our education are going to prepare those students for terminal degrees or certificates that provide them with the skills and knowledge that they need to get living wage career jobs. So often we hear about students, especially in the Valley, UC Merced graduates, et cetera, that are having to take minimum wage jobs in places like Target or Taco Bell or places like that. And so we really feel that we need to focus on programmatically. That's something that we take into consideration as well. And that the cost of education should not outweigh the wages that these students are going to be receiving when they enter the workforce and saddling them with such debt. And Dr. Arambula, you know the shortage of health professionals that we have here in the Central Valley, as well as Mr. Medina, you have the same thing in the Inland Empire, and I am a UC Riverside alum as well, so exactly. And so we have seen that the impact that that has on our ability to attract and retain even physicians in this area, because they can go to other areas and make more money in order to pay off that student debt. I also want to talk real quickly about partnerships. I came with a colleague and we had that workforce lens on because that's our work. But while we were sitting here and she had to leave, she made the suggestion that as you look at things like behavioral health and the shortage of, and that high ratio of counselors to students, why not tap into partners in the community, such as the federally qualified health centers, who have behavioral health services and other services that they're providing to the communities. They're very closely located in many cases to the universities, and maybe if they collaborate together, a group of them, along with the education system, they might be able to help meet some of those needs without just fully relying on a governmental program. So again, thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up is Dr. Joseph Jones, followed by Lucy Ruiz.
Thank you all for giving the opportunity. I just felt that I had a responsibility to at least say something that may be missing. I'm president of Fresno Pacific University, and when I'm new to the state, and when I came, I was told that the grand plan of California, which is one of the best education systems, was a four-legged stool, and you all have heard this. It was the community colleges, the CSUs, the CUs, and the independents. And so as we're looking at this master plan, I'm hoping that we don't forget the independents. As we look in terms of just the data, 22% of the bachelor's degrees that are awarded in the state come from the independents. There's about 78 of us. You know, say 54%, I think it's 52 or 54% of the master's degrees are coming from the independents. 54% of the doctorates are coming from the independents. And think about what happens when the independents become stifled or handicapped in some way. And quite often, the master's and bachelor's programs are supported by what comes in from the bachelor's programs. And so as we're thinking about in terms of higher education, we have worked on outcomes. We are really pressured about outcomes. Students don't come to us just because of name. They come to us because of outcomes. We at Fresno Pacific, we have a 4-year guarantee. If you don't do it in 4 years, if we have all those wraparound services, you don't do it in 4 years, it's free for you after that. We've been working with this compact about a 2-year guarantee, and we've met with the presidents of the community colleges. We're even working with Fresno State. When I hear they can't have it anymore, I sit down with the president, with Joe, and said, what can we do? We're here to actually do something and work in the Valley. 95% of our student body are California residents. You know, say 92% of those students are actually on scholarships. 54% of our students come from families of 40 with incomes of less than 40,000. So our population isn't that much different. And if you look at the independents, 60% of the population of students of color at Fresno Pacific, 62% of our population are students of color. So the populations aren't much different. You know, say, and we have actually worked very hard to actually make sure that there's a ROI, you know, say, return on investment. We greatly appreciate the support of the Cal grants. But one of the things that I really appreciate when I moved to this area is the compact. You know, say, and these colleges and universities are coming together and actually talking about how can we actually have an impact on this valley. For the students that are in this valley. We have regional campuses from Bakersfield to Merced. And so how can we actually work together to do that, and not try to compete, but really work together to have impact? I think that, as you're thinking about the master plan, I don't know who else is doing it. You know, again, I'm new here, but I think it's a great idea if you really are trying to have impact on education. I'll say this and I'll leave. You know, I have a PhD in the field of justice. I was a professor in that particular field, but I worked in that field for years. And so I'm always thinking, a reason why I've connected with education and justice. But you all probably have seen the reports because it came from the legislature. The legislative analyst report says that it's over $70,000 a year for inmates in prison. That's what we're spending. And so as we're thinking about education and investing, and so we should be actually be reluctant in terms of how we're looking at those wraparound services that we need all over to actually have students actually retain, graduate, and come back and get jobs and start businesses and invest in this state. And so I just want you to remember, we are independents, 78. We have capacity. We're ready to partner with all of the CSUs, the community colleges, and the CUs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Jones. Next up, we have Lucy Ruiz, followed by Amelia Martinez.
Thank you, Chair Berman. Obviously, I'm not Lucy Reese.
Got a little confused there.
She was going to put my name down, and apparently she put her own name down. I want to take this opportunity, first and foremost.
For the record, let us know who you are.
Oh, I'm sorry. John Leal.
Thank you, John.
State Center Community College District Trustee.
Thank you, sir.
Past Chair. I want to welcome home Dr. Arambula, and I want to welcome and thank you for being here for this very important session. And I know that we've had a lot of information. I'm only here to echo and support all of our speakers. And we have our Chancellor here. We have Dr. Goldsmith here, Community College President. We are working together here with others in the consortium to improve our situation. And you've heard all of the facts and figures, and we just hope that you will act upon that. And again, thank you for coming. Thank all of you for participating, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next up, we have Amelia Martinez, followed by Justin Damasilo.
Hello, my name is Amelia, or as my friends call me, Em. I'm a first-generation, second-year student at UCR. So before I continue, I want to shout out Jose Medina. And, you know, I think credit should be given where credit is due, and I think sometimes politicians don't have the best rep, but I think you've been a great advocate for us, so we really appreciate that. So I actually missed it, along with other students, we missed a day of lecture during week 8 to be here. So I really hope that what I'm about to say is not just another comment that you hear and that you forget about it. Because for us to be here, we had to drive out. My first year at UCR, I worked 3 jobs to make sure I wouldn't have to take out any loans. I was a full-time student, and I also interned for Senator Connie M. Leyva, and it was her staff that made sure I always ate. It was her staff that showed me what loans were. We do have an online training program when you take out a loan, but it's not enough. There needs to be more. One of her staff members actually graduated from UCR, so it was her the one that was telling me about things that I needed to do to find different resources. So I think, you know, that shows that we have a long way to meet students' needs on their respective campuses. Now, as a second year, I figured some things out, like park 20 minutes away so you pay less for parking. Join the Clean the Air Ambassadors so they'll give you dining dollars and you can save some money on food. Go on Twitter or your Facebook class account and try to find out the title of your books before anyone else can so you can find the book at the library and scan it so you don't have to pay for them. Share the clickers with friends so you don't have to pay the $50 to $75 fee for them and hope you don't get caught doing so because you're supposed to register only 1 clicker per person. Yeah, and as government relations director, I've had to make it upon myself to make sure that at every lobby corps meeting we have food. So the students participating in lobby corps, some of them get at least 1 good meal in an entire week. I shouldn't have to do that. As you know, as tuition increases, we have a proposed tuition increase vote coming up, and as tuition increases, fewer students from low-income backgrounds apply, even when they are eligible for financial aid. The thing about low-income students is that we need so much more than just financial aid. There's so many things that comes with fees, affording travel to get there. I commute for 40 minutes. If my parents hadn't loaned me their car, I wouldn't be able to make it to UCR. So there's so much more things that needs to be done, and I think this is a first great step. I'm happy that this is something that we're doing, and I hope moving forward it continues with even more momentum than it has right now, because this room should be packed. And yeah, and I think there's something that needs to be done either from y'all or I don't know anyone else, but something needs to be done to be able to give a stipend or something to students to make it out to things like this, because it is difficult for us to do this. A lot of things we advocate for are the things that we ourselves experience. So, you know, something needs to be done from y'all to have us at the table. I know you've heard this all before, and I know this process is long. I know that's the thing in politics, but please fight for this like your career depends on it. The state of California has achieved the unbelievable many times, and you all know this. We take risks when no one else dares to. We say yes, we can, and yes, we will when people shy away. This is the Californian spirit, and we've done crazy things before. Funding all students should not be something that we shy away from. All over the state, students have stepped up, and it's time that you continue to join us. Thank you.
Thank you, Amelia. Next up is Justin Damasilo, followed by Perla Flores.
Hello, forgive me if I ramble a bit. I drove over 300 miles and 4 hours of sleep to get here today. So a little background about
There's
me.
coffee in the back.
No, I'm
if you
actually
need
like,
it. Nope.
so a little background on me. I am the campus organizing director for ASUCR at UCR. I came here and I was really interested in this discussion because I was a homeless student. I lived under a pass of the 15 for several years because my parents were drug addicts. And I was told in first grade, again in 5th grade, again in 11th grade, that college wasn't for people like me. And that was something that I really internalized. And it really hurt. And I never thought I would be at AUC and I would be a student leader. But here I am. One of the things that I think is important to note is that we do have a severe funding issue. When I hear of tuition increases and then I look at like the state audit report of like the UC Office of the President, I get extremely frustrated because I have to make the choice. In order to come here, I had to exhaust my bank account to pay for the gas to put in my car. Or actually the car we rented. I actually like exhausted my bank account to get here today. So that's really hard for me, knowing that I'm not economically able. And when I get frustrated when I wait to get food or other resources at campus and I get told we're out. And I look at myself and I realize I'm one of the lucky ones. So I was a CC transfer. I was one of the lucky 92% that actually got through. And the reason why is I took 17 to 25 units every quarter, or every semester. I actually dual enrolled in 2 community colleges in order to override admissions telling me that I couldn't. Because I am taking care of my grandma who has cancer, and I understood that if I didn't get my degree, I would be homeless again. And so when you're looking at legislation, I urge you to remember that all of y'all most likely have always had access to clean clothes. You will never know the shame and degradation going into first grade, being caked in dirt and being told you smell. That was my first grade experience, and that happened again in 3rd and 4th grade, and it was awful. And so coming from a place of a lack of privilege, it means a lot to be able to speak up and actually look at a senator, for example, in the eye and say, hey, this is me, this is my name, and I need help. And then the closing remark that I would really like to make is that I don't know if I necessarily agree with a point made about the 15 to graduate plan, and the only reason that I do disagree with that plan is because I work extensively every single day. So I commute 70 miles because I cannot afford to live in the Riverside area. I was almost homeless again, but my best friend and her family took me in. So I was able to live in a very comfortable housing situation, but it's over 70 miles away. So every day I have to teeter on, am I going to eat or am I going to pay for gas to get to school? And then when I get to school, I work 12 to 15-hour days every single day. Sometimes I get home at 3 or 4 a.m. in the morning and then have to wake up at 8 a.m. and then go back to my classes. So that's about a 2-hour drive every single day, and it's really exhausting. I don't get any additional support. And I'm lucky if my financial aid covers even a fraction of any of the costs that I have, especially because my car is 18 years old. I had to save for 4 years to amass $1,500 in order to pay for it. And if that car breaks down, then I have no access to education. I'm one of the lucky ones. Like, think about that for a second. I'm lucky. There are so many students that have the exact same story, the exact same background, that aren't as lucky, that will never ever get to step foot on UCR. And so I really want y'all to think about that when you look at budgets and realize that we're more than just numbers and figures. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Next up, we have Perla Flores, followed by Lennon Curry.
Good evening, everyone. And first of all, I wanted to thank Fresno City College for having us here, and actually everyone who is in this room. Like, I'd like to thank you because it means a lot to not just me, but every person in here is here for a reason. And I know that together we're going to stand and fight for what we believe in. So, my name is Perla Flores, and I'm a first-generation, first-year student at the University of California, Riverside. And as a psychology major, I've always wanted to make a difference in the world, but to get there, I have to go to college first. And financially, that makes it very difficult. If tuition was to go up, I'd be forced to take a third job to pay off my education. My parents can't help me with money because, in the end, I'm actually helping them. They're not unemployed because they choose to. My mother has the duty to take care of my youngest 5-year-old sister, and my father suffers from a disability, and due to racism in his workplace, my father has been unjustly robbed of money, like not being paid overtime when he works it. And as a little girl, I was never really able to see my father. He would always leave at dawn, early morning, and arrive very late, and when you're little, you tend to sleep early. And sometimes I remember I would always wait at night, and I'd just be like, is Dad coming home? Sometimes like, no, he has to stay over there at work. And sometimes that made it even harder, too, for me, because I wouldn't even see him on weekends. And he worked excessively, basically, to support the life of his kids. And now I'm paying off college on my own and trying to support my family at the same time. Raising tuition would force me to take a job that would take away the time I need to study and do other work, such as like internships or being here. I'm sure I'm not the only student you've heard with this story, but I know we all have a bunch of potential, and all we ask is not to make it any harder than it already is. Thank you.
Thank you, Perla. Next up, we have Lennon Curry, followed by Tom Vu.
Good evening, everyone. I want to express my sincere gratitude to Fresno City Community College for not only being able to have this kind of meeting, but also having students come and present during public forum. My name is Lennon Vladimir Curry. Mi nombre es Lennon Vladimir Curry. I am currently a first-year political science major at the University of California, Riverside. Before I begin, I want to ask every respective committee member to imagine a life where a college education is deemed as unattainable simply due to your economic status. Unfortunately, this is a reality for many students across the CC, UC, and CSU system, including myself. Coming from a home of immigrants, the topic of immigrants from the Ciudad de Mexico, the topic of a college education was always often avoided to postpone the conversation about affording to pay for one. It was from a young age that I quickly acknowledged that a college education was needed for social mobility to break the cycle of financial deprivation. I'm here today not only to represent the minority voice on this kind of issue, but specifically UCR's Latinx student population who did not have the privilege of presenting in front of you fine folk here today. Currently, little more over than 50% of UCR students receive the Pell Grant. However, they still report there's still large student populations who report that they are food insecure, specifically because the Pell Grant doesn't cover for things such as books, etc. During my little time at UC Riverside, being the government relations assistant director, I've had the opportunity to work externally outside of UC Riverside and within UC Riverside student population, having students come up to me and tell me that the fact that they have to skip meals in order to buy books, the fact that a lot of students are homeless and they don't have anywhere to go during the summer, et cetera, or little week winter breaks. It's kind of disheartening, and it makes you really second guess what are our senator members doing, what are assembly members doing to make sure that UC students are represented and don't have to go through these kind of struggles. As a minority voice, I call on the committee not only to focus their efforts to create a higher ed master plan that addresses student basic needs, but one that provides equity for students of color. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lennon. Tom Vu to be followed by Taylor Chumley.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members. My name is Tom Vu. I'm with the Association of Independent California Colleges and Universities, AICCU. We are the organizational voice for 78 private nonprofit colleges and universities throughout the state.
Yep, just maybe move, there you go, right in front of it. There you go.
I just want to quickly touch on a couple of things. This past Tuesday, we had our annual Student Lobby Day, and we were joined by President Jones, but I think he just left. Over 120 Cal Grant students from across the state came up to the Capitol to meet with legislators and/or staff about the importance of the Cal Grant Award and the importance of maintaining it at $9,084. The award has not seen an increase since 2000, and it has actually decreased by 35% over the last decade due to inflation and also cuts. As Tikas noted, the Cal Grant is an integral part of access and success, especially for first-generation students and students from disadvantaged communities. The Cal Grant students in the nonprofit sector do extremely well. They have a 62% four-year graduation rate in the nonprofit sector. I think this exemplifies the wraparound services that President Jones mentioned when he was up here, that a nonprofit college can provide to struggling students. We're grateful that the award will not be cut this year, but we just want to note that a stable and hopefully increasing Cal Grant Award will help students access and succeed in the nonprofit sector. The second point, very quickly, AICCU is working on a variation of the Associate Degree for Transfer program that would create a strong and transparent pathway for transfer students to access more options when they look at where they want to transfer, and we hope that you can support that this year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Tom. Next up is Taylor Chumley, followed by Vignesh. I can't quite catch the last name. Dyer, possibly? Do we have either of those folks? Is Taylor here? No Taylor. Vignesh? All right. Help me out a little bit with your last name, if you might.
I'm Vignesh Iyer.
Vignesh, excuse me.
Sorry about my handwriting.
No, not at all.
But hi, I'm Vignesh Iyer. Good evening. I'm the legislative director from the Student Union Assembly at UC Santa Cruz. It's our student government body. And so I want to start by thanking the committee members who are here today, particularly Assemblymember Medina. I had the opportunity to speak in front of you at the Assembly Sub 2 budget hearing last week, and it's wonderful to see you here once again fighting for students and on behalf of us. But yeah, although I too drove 3 hours with my peers to get here, I am here. And I'm here at this hearing because I can afford to be, right? I'm privileged enough to be here, to be able to skip class, to not rely on minimum wage jobs, to afford my tuition and my basic needs. But we also have to remember that there were folks who couldn't make it here today, right? We have to remember that some folks work 2, sometimes 3 jobs and are enrolled as full or part-time students here within the UC who couldn't be here because they can't miss work or class. It's important to also recognize what all of us students, therefore, get in return for the work we put in within this broken system and to stay within it. We've heard within this hearing several statistics backing up this narrative about, lack of resources, lack of basic needs, and those statistics represent us, but they're also, representative of real students, real stories, and a total lack of access to affordable housing and food. So just a bunch of statistics, right? UCSC is home to the fourth worst smallest city in the US for renters. We do not have a designated off-campus site for housing. Our landlords are egregious offenders of mass rent fluctuations as well as unjust evictions. Our meal plans are expensive. Our food pantries are underfunded. So what do all of us want? We want greater state investment in all areas of public higher education, and this committee, albeit a small step, is a step in the right direction, but it will only mean something if its efforts are continuous and center student voices, and I can't emphasize that enough. So I implore all of you to carefully listen to the student stories, take them to heart, understand that there is a lot of emotional and physical labor put into coming here and to work to change the deplorable state of our current system. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Vignesh. And next up, we have, what do you think? Mr. or Mrs. Elliott? Do we have any? What is it? Cameron. Thank you, Cameron. Followed by Allison Lira.
Thank you guys for coming out today. I'm really glad we could all be here and discuss how to enhance higher education as a collective. My name is Cameron Elliott. I'm a first-year student at UC Santa Cruz. I'm a part of the student union, the student government at UC Santa Cruz. And as Vignesh said, we're all privileged enough to be here and to afford to miss a day of school and not have to work to pay tuition. I mean, that's going to change for me real soon here, but yeah. What was brought up earlier was that the state needs to admit more students. I understand this. Transfer students are not transferring to four-year universities because there's just not space. But UC Santa Cruz is at capacity, like in every way, shape, and form. Buses are filled, they leave the station without admitting every student who is waiting at the bus stop. Students have to wait longer. Classes are completely full. Students who need to take prerequisites to declare majors cannot do that, and as a result are staying for longer than 4 years at the institution. Yes, and the solution to this is to simply fund the university system the way it should be. What was brought up earlier as well was an emphasis on mental health. UC Santa Cruz has an institution called CAPS, which is the Counseling and Psychological Services department at our school. We are currently staffed at a ratio of 1 to 1,700 student to faculty ratio there. And after 4 sessions at that institution, you're referred off campus, assuming you can even afford to go there or your insurance covers it. So also, that's funded by student fees and not by anything else. So students are paying for this. Another thing I wanted to bring up was food pantries. We have one food pantry on our entire campus serving all 17,000 students, undergraduate, and then the graduate students as well. That one is about to sunset. It was established by our student government. The future of it is uncertain because the space it is held in is in OPERS, which is our Office for Physical Education and Recreation and Sports. So the gym and sports and all that, NCAA. And the space isn't designated to be a food pantry. That was established by the student union, not by any sort of tuition or administrative body. Currently, Tim Galarno, I don't know if I got his name right, he spoke about this. He's working to change one of our coffee shops into a food pantry to replace this new one. And I just think it's astounding that students have to take it upon themselves to perform services that shouldn't be shouldn't be their problem. Especially when we pay tuition that is so expensive and we're threatened with it being raised this year. The housing crisis has been addressed as well Clyde McNesh, and will be acknowledged by Anthony real soon here as well. So I'll just concede my time. Thank you guys for all being here.
Thank you, Cameron. Next, I have Allison Lira, followed by Anthony Fubiano.
Hi, I'm Allison Lira, and I'm a third year at UC Santa Cruz. So for the last couple of years, I've been helping my sister and my cousin apply for college, and it's been a really special time because we're all a family of immigrants, and we're going to be the first generation in our family to go. And everyone's so excited and everyone's so proud, but at the same time, there's just so much worry involved in applying because over the last couple of years in this process and in going to college myself, it's become so clear that access to higher education, access to the path that takes you to your dreams is like so hard. And it's not just getting into your dream school. I don't know how to tell my cousins, I don't know how to tell my sister that like getting there and maintaining access to the school of your dreams sometimes requires skipping meals, sometimes requires working multiple jobs, sometimes requires like not being able to study and failing a test and having to deal with that. So we need to do better. All of us need to do better. And there are so many kids out there with so much ambition, that are so smart and so bright, who do not get the opportunity, who feel like they can't. And it's a shame, and we need to do better. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Allison. Next up is Anthony Fubiano, followed by Teresa Wachira.
Afternoon. I'd like to say it's an honor being here at this meeting. I'd like to thank the committee for giving me the opportunity to talk about some of the current issues I have witnessed and experienced at my university, UC Santa Cruz. And I wanted to start off by saying my name is Anthony Fabiano. I'm a first-year student. And as a freshman starting university in the fall of 2017, I felt very excited, felt very grateful to witness some of the opportunities to be given to me, some of the resources I could potentially like take advantage of. But I wanted to talk and stress about like some of the issues regarding the relationship between housing and over-enrollment at my university. And throughout the year, I've witnessed the school cram thousands of students into various housing units that just don't have the capacity or the utilities to fit like most of these people. And many of the dorms, such as mine, are often very crowded and just very not suitable for living conditions. For me, this transformation was very uncomfortable to handle. Some of the utilities in my dorm were often exhausted to the point of having electrical blackouts, clogged toilets, sinks, and shower drains, as well as various damages like broken doors, broken windows sometimes, broken washing machines and dryers. And living in a small room with two other roommates who have various stuff, it can often prove very claustrophobic to me sometimes, as well as being very affected to my allergies. I often, as a person with a history of asthma, it often proves like very stressful to be comfortable in and like very stressful to sleep as well. So I often found myself witnessing that I've been prone to be more sick often. I've often got sore throats, very runny noses, and I often found myself going to the health center like every month or so. And it may seem simple to just say, make a simple request, maybe find yourself a single room, but the wait list is astoundingly long because of how many students are enrolled at UCSC, that the most likely response that I would receive would be next year in the fall of 2018. And because of this, I also have to juggle the stresses of studying for my finals on winter quarter and also knowing where am I gonna live next year, who am I gonna live with, and how are we gonna figure out the costs and stuff like that. So I just wanted to ask you all like just 3 questions to consider about as you go home today. And number one was, since it has been reported that the state of California is projected to gain a $6 to $7 million surplus, Will a good proportion of it go to the various situations that California public institutions are currently facing? And number two is, what is currently the best plan to have to counteract some of these issues? And with number three, with all of us residing in the state that holds some of the world's greatest learning institutions, and to hear how these great colleges are slowly deteriorating is very alarming and disheartening for me. For myself and thousands of other students in the UC system, Cal State system, and California Community College system aren't provided the proper amount and quality of resources needed to survive and grow, then how do you expect our generation to support the next generation of college students? Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Next up is Teresa Wakira, followed by Mauricio Trojo.
Hello everyone, my name is Teresa Washida and I'm the External Vice President for the Associated Students of UC Merced, as well as the Campaign Chair for UCSA. I'm here today to ask that you all put more funding in higher education. I want to start by telling you my narrative of how I got into the UC and my journey in the UC. So 4 years of high school, fun times. I took 9 AP classes, I was involved, I did student government, but on top of that, making sure that I was attractive to the UC, I was also acting as a parent for my sisters, because my parents were busy, right? They had to work in order for me to go to college. And so I did well. I did my first semester. I did really well. I got on the honors system. And then I come home over winter break and my parents break the news. They were like, Teresa, I don't think you can go back to another semester at UC Merced, right? 4 years I spent juggling, training, 4 years I spent juggling student government, dealing my AP classes, dealing with my sisters, right? Making sure that they go to school, making sure that they were clean, making sure they ate, making sure they were fed. Like, I was practically a parent to my sisters, right? At the age of 14, I was taking care of 3 people, right? And for all of that hard work to go down to the garbage because my parents couldn't afford for me to stay at UC Merced, right? So I hope that you all are taking my narrative into consideration, right? You have people who spent so much time and energy just to get here, right? And now that we got here, we don't have the resources to sustain us, right? I don't think it should be this difficult, right? I don't know the resources offered to me at Merced because I'm an immigrant, right? I didn't have parents I could talk to. I didn't have like grandparents I could talk to. I was the first one in my family to attend a 4-year university. So I didn't have the opportunity or resources or whatever that my school provided. I didn't know about that, right? Because again, immigrant, I came here when I was 3, we knew nothing, we just knew each other. That's what I had, my family, right? And so going to college, right, not having my family, not having my support system, right, but also having CAPS, like having a 2-3 week wait to go to CAPS, that's absurd, right? So making sure that you're also putting money into mental health resources, because Merced has the highest percentage of POC students, right, low-income students, but no way to support them, right? We don't have a food pantry on our campus, right? Our food pantry is once a month off campus. Our food pantry is inaccessible to students, right? So making sure that you all are putting money into higher education to sustain your students, right? Because we shouldn't be working 3 jobs, right? Also juggling our classes to make sure we're gonna go to grad school, which is basically required now if you really want to get far within a career, right? So I really ask that you all are taking everything that we're saying into consideration, and that you fund the UC, fund the CSUs, fund the community colleges, because if you don't, my sisters won't be here, my siblings won't be here. And now my goal is to graduate, right, making sure I make money so my sisters can attend colleges, because I'll be the one who has to raise them, right, because my parents are getting old, and that will be my responsibility. So I'm back to square one. I'm back to being a parent, right, when I should be an older sister, when I should be a mentor, right? So yeah, I hope that you all consider that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Teresa. Next up, we have Mauricio Trojo.
Good afternoon. My name is Mauricio Trejo. I am an undergraduate, undocumented working class and student leader at the University of California, Merced. Currently, I serve as the organizing director for the External Office of Associate Students of UC Merced and have the privilege of serving on the executive board of the UC Student Association as the campus action chair. At the young age of 8 years old, my single mother and my family decided to migrate to the United States, where I resided in Orange County, Garden Grove, California. Having to navigate the American culture, learn the language, and adapt myself into a society that did not necessarily view me as a potential for this state or even to anything, I had to fight and fend for resources. Growing up with a single mother, I had to begin working at a young age of 12 years old, where I would do construction work. While at the same time balancing my education, when I began high school, people around me were thinking and talking about going to college or thinking about possibilities, and they were gaining themselves those necessity opportunities to get there. So now I continue to push myself, and I continue to push myself to get there, while at the same time balancing the work and being involved in the community that I was a part of, being a mentor to a lot of people that were around me who were like myself undocumented. So I saw myself applying to college, applying to the CSUs and UCs, which none of them, I didn't meet their standards. I wasn't accepted to any of the universities that I attended to, but I decided to appeal my way through the system, and that's where I ended up at UC Merced. Now, UC Merced considers itself a Hispanic serving institution with, I believe it's 80% people of color, first-generation low-income students. Yet Merced does not have the resources to retain and sustain these students. As Teresa mentioned, we have an off-campus food pantry, and currently 50% of UC Merced students, undergraduate students, face food insecurity, where at the system level, it's 46%. That's 11% more than system-wide that UC Merced students are facing food insecurity. So now really think about that. We live in the Central Valley where literally food is grown here. Yet students, not just in Merced, not just students, but people in their own community in the Central Valley are going hungry. So I'm here today because once I arrived to UC Merced, I was pushed to go into higher education as a way to liberate myself, but at the same time, I was not able to find the retention and the resources needed for me to thrive in that university system. Currently, right now, I had an exam this morning, and we had to drive all the way up here. I'm currently missing work. I'm forced to work 28 hours plus a week at the same time to maintain myself and maintain my family back home. I pay my mom's bills while currently being a student leader and being a student worker. I work for Services for Undocumented Students on my campus, the Advising Center for the Social Sciences, Humanities, and Arts, and I serve as an intern for ASME 3299. Go Unions. But at the same time, we're forced to be able to find and fend these resources. As you see today, we have no administrators from UC Merced that came and had this conversation with you all. There's an issue there. We need to look to fund both the UC system, the CSU system, and the CSU and the community colleges. Today we talked about equity, we talked about inclusion, we talked about diversity, we talked about economic and social justice. Yet we can't have these conversations if we're providing and not unpacking the systematic barriers for students to thrive in these systems. We're not finding those solutions, and that's why I'm here for you as I'm planning to graduate. And anxiety levels are hard for me as we just had ICE raids in Merced County just this past week, and we're not doing anything to actively protect our students and protect their sustainability within these systems. So I ask you today, as we think about the future and as you continue to increase enrollment, that you continue to fund these systems that these students use to thrive and bring more to what it is California has to provide. Thank you all for your time. My name is Mauricio.
Thank you, Mauricio. And rightfully so, we're going to close out public comment with a Fresno City College student, is it Danilo Castillo? Danilo Castillo. Thank you, Danilo.
You're welcome. Good evening, everybody. My name is Danilo Castillo. I attend here at Fresno City. I'm secretary of the Philosophy Club and a member of the Pathway to Law program. It's a pipeline program designed to diversify the demographics and prepare and inspire students to pursue a career in law. I'm there to provide representation for people like me, something that the law career, like many, are missing. Like Mr. Medina mentioned, here we are again, asking for people like us, faculty like us, staff like us, etc., right? I'm gonna move on to the US debt is approaching 20 trillion, a common term that's being used. Some students acquire debt before they go into college. Some students acquire debt when they're in college. Some students
who become individuals and go into the workforce leave college, graduating college with debt, right? So it makes me wonder, are we being conditioned and accustomed to debt? Is it a trickle-down effect? More of a rhetorical question. Speaking of debt, Berkeley Law Program with housing is over $81,000 a year. Times that by 3, easily over $200K. All right. Let me see. Like many people who spoke up here depend on grants in order for them to stay in school, to pay for bare necessities, basic needs, right? Like Spencer mentioned, one of the speakers at the very beginning. So the Trump administration, so this is my question to you, to the panel. The Trump administration is seeking to cut more than $3 billion, over 5% from the education department, while investing $1.6 billion to support private school vouchers and other school choice programs. The key proposed changes cuts several discretionary grant programs, which many people spoke up here depend on, grants, including the DC tuition aid program. Now my question is, what steps or actions are being taken to prepare for this change on your end? And what steps and or actions do you recommend students to prepare for this change? Thank you. My name is Danilo Castillo. I attend Fresno City here. Right? Yeah.
Thank you, Danilo. And it looks like I have one more comment, one more public commenter. Please let us know your name.
My name is Ramon Jimenez Ortega, and I am from Fresno State University. I am actually from an organization known as SQE, Students for Quality Education, and I am a CFA intern. And so everything has gone wrong today. I lost my notes, and apparently I didn't sign up on the right place.
You're doing great.
But,
you're doing great.
I just came here to say, I have struggled with food insecurity. I have actually used the student pantry on campus. And it's not as great as they made it seem in the panel. A lot of the time, the food there is spoiled. So we kind of have to get the food and hope that it's still edible. In addition, right now we are facing a possible tuition increase for the second year in a row. We are actually planning on going over to Sacramento and asking Governor Brown for more funding for CSU, because something that we've noticed is that as more students of color have entered the CSUs, the lighter, the funding for CSUs has become lighter, and we feel that that is not right. We want something, a pool of money for the CSUs so that we don't have to struggle with this every year. Because we actually, I convinced Board of Hugo Morales, who is the Board of Trustees member here in Fresno, we convinced him to vote against the increase, but it took a while because he thought that was the only way that CSUs can be funded. But this year, they decided to allow for Governor Brown to propose his budget before the decision. So that is why we are going to Sacramento, and we are hoping to take as many people as we can. I want to invite all of you to come with us to Sacramento to ask for the funding. Mr. Arambula, Mr. Medina, Mr. Allen, Mr. Berman, I hope that you can join us, and everyone else here. We have people here from RISE, who I hope will join us also. We also had a CSSA member, and I hope that they can join us also. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think Mr. Allen has a plane to catch in about 45 minutes.
Yeah,
so
I really do need to go. But let me just say that there's a group of senators that are going to be proposing a buyout of the tuition increases from the new budget, and I would love to have my colleagues join us. We would certainly love to hear about when that rally is going to be, and I'm sure you'll have a number of members who will be interested in coming. You know, I was very touched by the comments that were made. I remember hearing a lot of these comments when I was on the Board of Regents as a student member, and it's just sad to me how many of the problems that we talked about then haven't yet been solved. In fact, in some respects, they've gotten worse. with the situation in Washington and everything else. So I really appreciate everyone being here and coming from so far, and I know the hardships you took to get here. And we're going to work hard to try to turn around some of that extra money that's in the budget to help address some of these affordability questions. And I just encourage you to keep this advocacy up. Your passion, your sincerity, your stories, I think, are very moving. They're very telling. You need to bring them to more elected officials. You need to bring them to the governor. You need to bring them to the members of Congress who represent the Central Valley and members of the legislature as well, so that they will take those voices with them when they're making their decisions in Washington and in Sacramento. So I really do appreciate everybody's comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Medina.
I didn't make an opening statement, so I feel good about making a closing statement. To the student from Santa Barbara, first let me thank everyone, and including Fresno Community College and our chair for having us here. But I think what you're doing and what you're saying here today is exactly what, like Senator Allen said, needs to continue to happen. It is too often in Sacramento that we look at numbers and not individuals. So if the students will continue to do what they've done here today, what they did in Sacramento a couple of weeks ago, and bring more students with you and bring more stories with you so that the legislature and the governor hears the effect of what we're doing in Sacramento on your individual lives, I think we'll do better. So thank you. And especially to the students from UC Riverside for being here.
Thank you, Chairman Medina. Dr. Arambula, would you like to say anything?
I was moved today. You know, I'm encouraged to think that our community will look like what we saw today. That this advocacy that you are doing is inspiring so many of us means a lot. And I just wanted to say thank you to all the students who took time out. I know it's not easy, I know it's not cheap, but we need to hear your voices. And I just wanted to thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Arambula. So lastly, I want to thank everyone here today, but I especially want to thank the students that came today and participated and told us your stories, whether it was on the panels or during public comment, especially considering how far many of you traveled to get here. A lot of you said, you know, I want to make sure that you hear us, and I promise you that we hear you, and that we are here to fight for you, and that students like Amelia shouldn't have to hack the public college system by parking 20 minutes away and joining a student group to get free meals. And I mean, you know, that shouldn't be what higher education is about. Higher education should be challenging, but it should be intellectually challenging and academically challenging, and not challenging to know where your next meal is going to come from or where you're going to sleep at night. And so we have a lot of work to do. That's why I created the select committee. It wasn't to maintain the status quo. It was to recognize that students in 2018 and 2025 and 2030 have very different challenges than students in 1960 and 1970 and 1980. And those students today look a lot different than the students from 60 years ago. And so, you know, today has been incredibly helpful for us, informative for us, and will help us as we start to discuss what changes we can make to the master plan and make sure that those changes you know, are implemented on our UC, CSU, and community college campuses and our independent colleges, if the president left, but yes, absolutely on our independent colleges as well. And so, again, I want to thank all of you for participating. I, again, want to thank Dr. Goldsmith and her team here at Fresno City College for all of your help. And lastly, I'd like to thank my staff, my legislative director, Ellen Green, my assembly fellow, Elizabeth Schmidt in the back. And I know Dr. Arambula, some of your staff helped as well, if you want to give them a shout out.
To Ana, Arturo, and Zach, thank you guys for everything that you do.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, and I hope you continue to participate. We'll have 2 more hearings and then a lot of work to go. Thank you.